What's up, everybody? Good evening.
Good to be
Aaron.
back.
Really good to be back with Aaron. Dude, we were saying earlier before the show, it's been 25 years since you and I talked. So it's been a moment.
Remind that it's been
Right?
a while.
Yeah, it was crazy. That night, we were talking offline too, was at Safe and Sound in Rochester, New Hampshire. And I believe it was Bane, Days Gone, Piebald, Strike 3. And it was so hot in there, it actually took the finish off of Aaron's guitar. So I remember that's what we were talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
In the annals of very hot Bane shows, that one always stuck out to me because after every band that played that night, they had to clear the entire room out and just let it sit with the door open for 20 minutes or you just were going to die in there because there was no ventilation at all. There were no windows. There was one doorway in, and then it was a cement fucking box.
That's right. I think we looked across the room, man. It was like a haze. Like it was like just had natural forming condensation in the air. I mean, it was wild. That's right.
Jeez.
Yeah.
It's funny that you were there. That one always stood out to me as one of the top ones we ever played.
Wasn't there one of those shows there? I don't know if it was that night or one of the other ones where it's either Aaron or Zach broke the headstock off the SG. Was there
possibly?
Yeah.
Very possibly.
Yeah. Oh,
bounced it off the roof, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, that sucks, dude. Yeah. One piece till you're done. It's out. So,
I mean,
wild time.
Those early Bane shows, 96 through like 98, 99 were so crazy. Things were just getting broken all the time, everywhere.
Yeah. We were talking about that. Like it was hard to put into words. Like John, like when I talk to people and he takes them out of my mind, but dude, like it was such a magical era of like everything coming together with just like bands and you could go out on a Tuesday night at some rogue coffee shop somewhere and there'd be literally 300-400 kids packed in there. So I'm interested to hear like your take about that time and what it was like from your perspective. I know mine, but I want to hear yours and what that was. Yeah.
Well, I was a little older by the time Bane started. I was already in my mid-20s. I had done hardcore bands through the late 80s through my teens and then took a little break, kind of went and explored other things, rock and roll music and hanging out with people my own age and stuff like that. And then sort of came running back to hardcore once I realized that I just didn't feel comfortable anywhere else. And luckily got to start a band fresh at a spot in my life where I was a little bit more mature, had a little bit more of an idea of what I wanted to do and sort of what made the whole thing so special to me, you know, where when you're 17, you don't realize those things. You don't have that perspective. I was lucky to be able to start Bane at a time where, I was really ready to see how lucky I was to have it. And the thing that struck me, as you said, about that moment was just like that it was so driven by energetic kids that were doing everything, that were making everything happen on their own terms. Beyond starting bands, they were labels and there were fanzines and the kids were doing the art for the flyers. And it was just like this whole community generated by youthful energy that I think really made that time pretty magical. Like we were all out there fucking doing it. You know what I mean? Starting bands, putting these record labels together, putting bands out on tour. We were just fucking doing it. And it was pretty special.
Yeah. You guys were super.
It's not like that now. I'm not on the front lines now with the, 18 and 19-year-old kids. So I'm not saying that our time was any better, but that was the time where I was really sort of entrenched in it and could just see, wow, man, this is cool. We're not waiting for anyone to tell us how to do it or if we should do it, if it's okay to do it. We were just making things happen, which pretty great.
Yeah, and it's pre-internet too. So just the networking. I still have my black book of everybody's name and phone number and bands all up and down the East Coast. I still have. I think about ringing up some people, just be like, "Does this number still work?" I just call them up. Yeah. And Bane and you guys were super fortunate because you were in Worcester, which was like the Mecca Center. That was it, man. You had all the great venues were down there: Palladium, Espresso Bar, Space, all of those venues that were there. So how fortunate were you to be in Worcester at that time? I mean, that was
cool.
A motherland. Yeah.
Just and location wise it's like an hour, maybe 2 hours from everywhere, but it's not 4 hours from anywhere. Like if kids were willing to get in the car and go for an hour or two, they could come to us from Albany to Boston to up in New Hampshire to Maine to like Southern Connecticut. You could get to Worcester without too much of a problem. So we were pretty lucky as far as where we were geographically.
those venues were so awesome and so accommodative too. Like they were just like, yeah, you guys can come do some crazy stuff to our building for 3 hours on Wednesday night. Have at it. You know,
not a bouncer in sight. We were just absolutely lawless, man. It was very wild time.
Yeah,
man,
it was crazy. Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to say before I forget too. I don't even tell you this yet, Joel. I have a group chat with some close friends, like 10 of us in there. It gets kind of out of control, actually. It's too many texts, but a couple of them are hardcore punk / metal heads. So I mentioned the show tonight, and they were like, "No fucking way!"
Yeah.
My friend Davey's like, "Those guys are Boston legends, man." I'm like, "Yeah, that's." He's like, "Tune in." Yeah. So I just wanted to let you know, I got some fans in my group chat too. So
love that.
Yeah.
Actually, one of them, he's a singer in a metal band right now. So they're starting to tour. They're doing their thing. They got a music video out there now. Like I'm happy for them. You know, it's awesome to see people start touring again too. You know, now that the world's hopefully getting back to normal somewhat. So
I went to go see this band last night. This band Fucked Up from Canada, and it was just filled me with joy. The feeling that, wow, things are back. You know, kids are back. Things are starting to feel back to normal again, finally.
Yeah.
Crazy 2 years, man. It was very strange.
Yeah, I got kiddos, and I'm excited to take them out, show them that there's more to the world than just New England. Because we couldn't really get around very much. So looking forward to getting on the road. And
I went to a Chevelle concert back in March, I think it was, and it was in Manchester. Yeah, Manchester, New Hampshire. And it was so weird being around like 10,000 people again, because it was packed. It was Korn was there too. So it was, it was Korn and Chevelle, and it was a packed house, and it just felt so good to like hear live music again. So, but yeah, so, sorry.
It's all right. No, it's all good, man. I think one of the most incredible things with Bane was that you guys played so much all the time. I had no lie, Aaron. I went to 63 consecutive Bane shows, but it was easy because you guys played like 15 times a week. So
we like to play, man, for sure. Once we got that hook was in our mouths, we couldn't get it out, man. We just loved it so much. We just didn't know how to stop doing it.
Yeah. Unbelievable. You probably the hardest working band I've ever known. I was like, I can't keep up with this. I don't know how you did it, but it was awesome. Yeah.
It's fine. I have a therapist now, and sometimes we talk about how like I've never really worked a day in my life. Like I've never really had a real job type thing, and just never felt connected to that type of world. And she always has to stop and remind me that Bane was my work.
Oh, hell yeah.
I did it for 22 years, but never for a single moment did it ever feel like work to me. It never felt like a job. It was just, I would have done it for free, you know, the whole way through. And she has to stop and check me sometimes and be like, you worked really hard at that for a long time. Don't forget that. It never felt that way to me, you know. It never felt like, oh God, this is agony. I'm having to give so much of myself to this. And it was never that for me.
Right. Yeah, you guys were in your case real lucky to find your passion early on in life, right? That doesn't happen for a lot of people. They might find it when they're 50 or 60, but
for sure,
man, you hit it at 25. I mean, or younger. I mean, but able to do it.
That was barely in college, man. 18 years old when he hit the road with us.
Yeah,
those guys were kids, man, and they gave their fucking early adulthood to the band. They just fucking handed it over and just got in that van and went.
Yeah, there were so many bands too. Like back then, it's like, and you guys weren't just in one band. It was like members from your band were in other bands. So they had like 2, 3, 4 bands going on at once and playing live and making albums. I mean, holy shit!
Yeah,
it was
crazy.
It was incredible. And I wish someone. I know you have your documentary holding this moment, but I wish somebody else would kind of do a synopsis of that scene. Like no one's really kind of pulled it all together and interviewed people and put something together about how epic that was. I mean, it's such a thing that it's like something that happened that nobody knows that happened, you know? Yeah. So
it's crazy.
Yeah. It really is.
When you look back on videos from shows like the back to school jams downstairs at the Palladium, and there was 900 kids in that room, you don't get that for hardcore shows up here anywhere anymore. You know, we're hoping for 300-400 kids is an amazing night anywhere in and around Boston nowadays. But back then it was like, it was not a big deal to have way more, twice that at a show, like you were saying, on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
There were a lot of kids that were very, very plugged in and fired up at that time, for sure.
Yeah. You have a unique perspective because of your time that you spent there. So how did you see things change from those early days throughout that 25 years?
Well, you know, yeah, it's such a long span of time, is that you see dips and valleys and rises, and you just realize that things just sort of like come and go, and you never know what's going to spark sort of the next big thing, the next level of excitement, where kids are coming out and a lot of bands are being formed. And I feel like I saw it happen, I don't know, 4 or 5 different times throughout the span of Bane, just talking locally, where like there were some dips where maybe there weren't a ton of bands, a ton of kids coming to shows, and then all of a sudden there's an explosion and there's new bands and new venues, and that brings out kids, and then those kids starting bands, and then all of a sudden you're like, have a very thriving scene again. And I feel like I saw it happen a few times. It was like watching a merry-go-round, you know, you just, even when it would be bad, you would know, give it some time. This is like too vital of a city, Boston. There's just too many young people, too many schools, too much energy here. Someone will come along and they'll re-spark things. And yeah, that's how it would work.
That's awesome. Yeah, because like I said, you have such a unique perspective on it, because you have such a good cross-section there. Then some people are in it for 3, 4, 5 years like myself, and I didn't have the 20-year view. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Is there something now when you think about, you've been removed from Bane, you know, for a few years now, looking back on it, how has that vision changed versus when you were in it, and what does that look like for you, kind of thinking back retrospectively?
You know, it's hard to yeah, I don't know, there's a time where you don't feel like you're putting in any effort to be plugged into things. You just are plugged into things. It's just your whole social circle is motivated towards this one thing. And as you get, you know, the band ended, and now most of my friends are now older and they're married and they have families, and they're less motivated to just stay plugged in. You know, they're not on the front lines anymore. And it just becomes harder to sort of generate that energy all by myself, to really know exactly who's who and what's going on in those things. And it's just a natural part of life, I guess. You know, you just sort of start to slowly grow away from it. Not that I love it any less, or that I'm always interested in knowing what's going on in the new bands and hearing new bands and checking out records, but it's not like it was when I was younger, you know, where it was thoughtless. You were just in the mix all the time because everyone around you was in the mix all the time. And now it takes a little bit more effort. You know, there are times where I'll see a lineup of shows playing, not even far from the house, and just won't have it in me to go. None of my friends are really going to be there. It's just different now. As you get older, it gets different.
Yeah, I used to have a joke that I said, you know, your time's kind of come when you get that bands in town email from Ticketmaster and you don't recognize anybody on it anymore. Yeah. I'm like, oh shit, like I'm old now.
You just look at the whole lineup of current bands on a record label, on a label that used to be like the label when I was around, and I can't tell you a thing about any of them.
Right. Yeah. It to a degree, you know, the internet's put out so much material, and it's like coming at you all the time. It's really hard to keep up and then also filter through, you know, what's worth attention and what's not. Also,
right.
It wasn't like that back in the day, you know. It just wasn't there. Yeah.
A couple of years before the pandemic, I had a brief stint. I started a new band. Well, I joined an existing band, sang in a band called Antagonize, that were made up of kids that were in their 20s, that were very much young frontline kids. And we would do weekends, and I would just fire questions at them like, what's this band? Where's this band from? I keep hearing about this band. Tell me about this band. And for this little blip, I had all the information that I needed through them. It was really nice to be able to like have kids who were really plugged in tell me what was going on.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, when you think like when you're younger, right? Like when I was a kid, or, you know, even in my early 20s, I never thought there would become a point where I would think like that. Like, I don't know that band. Like, who is this? Like, what is this sound? This isn't music. Like, this isn't what I listen to. You know, like you find yourself going to the classic stations, and it's like, wow, I used to pick on my parents for that, you know, and here I am. So, yeah.
I know.
Oh man.
Yeah. Yes. I was going to ask too. Obviously, you're a creative person. You'll always be a creative person. So now that you've been kind of removed from being the front man of that band, what are you doing to get that creative outlet out?
I mean, I've been writing, as I hinted before we went on air. When the pandemic started, I've always written since I was 12 years old. As soon as I learned that you can just write any story you want and put it on paper, you're allowed to do that, I started doing it. I wrote all through my childhood, all through my teens, then fell in love with movies as I got a little bit into my later teens, early 20s, and would write terribly written screenplays. And always have a list of stories in my head that I think need to be told, that I think I would be able to tell, and very seldom do anything with it. Very seldom sit down and actually do the hard work. And I had an excuse for a long time because I was writing the lyrics for Bane, and I was creatively fulfilled through that. That gave me enough of a feeling of accomplishment as a writer that I needed. And then, that ended. And then it became hard. It became hard to figure out new ways to express myself. And then, a month into the pandemic, I would actually say less than a month, when it started to feel like this is going to go on for a long time. You're going to be in this house for a long time. I sort of told myself I didn't want to come out of it without something to show for it. And I decided I was going to write a book. I was going to fucking buckle in and write every single day, write a novel. So that's what I've been working on since April of 2020, every single day.
Awesome.
And I have no idea how to write a novel. I didn't make it past 9th grade. I have always bullshitted my way through anything I've ever done, and have taken that attitude into this. And it's been wow. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The most humbling, the most difficult thing I've ever taken on by far. So I was very excited to come on here and to meet you, John, when I saw that you had just a month ago, right? You released the novel a month ago.
Yeah, it was just over a month ago now. Yeah.
And it's your debut?
Yep. Yeah, but I had a couple short stories published last year, but yeah, it's my first novel. So,
did the short stories give you the push that you needed? I can fucking do this?
That's exactly it. Well, so when Joel and I got in touch and started Livid writing comics, that gave me the itch to. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mentioned to you before, the comic was initially going to be a novel, so I had the itch. And like yourself and a lot of creatives out there, I feel like the pandemic gave us the excuse we needed to say, hey, it's either now or never. If you're not going to do it now, when the hell are you going to do this? So I got back into drawing, and I'm like, this is cool and all, but I want to write. I started doing the comic stuff with Joel, and then I saw an open call for a short story submission in this horror group I'm in on Facebook. I'm like, screw it, I'm gonna try it. I hear people get rejected all the time, and what's it gonna hurt,
Yes.
And similar to you, I wrote growing up. I wrote terrible movie scripts. We made them. There's characters in this book based off us making horror movies in the woods. That was us as kids. We ripped off Friday the 13th all the time, I did it growing up, but I never sat down and took it serious until that first short story last summer. And I submitted it to an anthology. I didn't hear back from them for 4 months. So I'm like, I guess I didn't get in. So I submitted it to another one. And then I heard back from both of them within 2 weeks of each other that they both accepted it. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, guys, I submitted it to both of you. I'm sorry. And they were both cool with it. But that's what gave me that itch. I'm like, man, if I just got accepted the first time I ever tried this, maybe I can do this. So I set out to write a novella. I didn't think I could write a full novel yet. So I wanted to write something a bit shorter. And then as I was writing it, I blew past the length of a novella, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm writing a novel. I don't know if it's good, but I'm writing it. Yeah. So yeah. So that short story gave me the itch to keep going. And now I don't think I could ever not do it now. I'm 50,000 words into my next novel right now. So
yes, dog. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't stop if I wanted to. And that the second one just got picked up by a publisher too. So, the first one The Cursed Among Us, I self-published.
I saw a million questions about that, man. That does not seem
I'm happy to do it on air or off there. I don't care. Yeah. But I'm happy to talk about that. But I went into the first book knowing I wanted to self-publish because I just wanted to prove myself as a writer. Like I didn't even want to put the effort into researching, how to go to publishers and do all that hard work. And I thought if I could sell a book on my own, then that would make me look better to publishers on my next book. And thank God it actually paid off. It could have gone the opposite way. It could have been like bombed and people didn't buy it. So then I started writing my second book, and I submitted the first 10,000 words to a publisher. They asked for the first 10,000. If they like it, they want the rest of it. And I told them I didn't have the book done, and she said to do it, submit it anyways. If we like it enough, we'll still give you a chance. And a couple months later, I got the email that they accepted it, and I was like, yes. So
that is fucking huge. That has to feel amazing.
Yeah, I mean, every time I open a box of books, it's still, I don't think that feeling will ever go away. Same with comics. I'm sure it was the same with albums. When you get those, it's just that feeling never goes away. So
it's really the best feeling when it finally is like physically in front of you, instead of existing in your brain or existing through these, wavelengths. It's just like, well, here's our work.
Yeah. But I didn't go to school for writing or anything. I always knew I wanted to write, and like I definitely did better in writing classes than other classes. But I went to school for business management, and I hated every part of it. Like it was not what I wanted to do. It pays the bills, I guess. But
I've heard enough writers say that really good writing can't really be taught. You kind of just have it, or you pick it up through reading other works. That it's not really a thing that you need to go to school for. You need
Like I'm a horror junkie. I've read like horror novels since like 7th grade. Like that, I read it in 8th grade. And I never really turned back. Like I was always reading books. Like I have a twin brother. We used to share a room, and he used to hate me because I would sit there with a flashlight reading in the dark all night. But yeah, I've read a lot of books, and that definitely, whether you mean to or not, it definitely helps develop how to structure sentences and plots and stuff in your head. So, and then, I've taken some like masterclass things online, not like actual courses, but, watching videos and stuff just to try to help get smarter about it. And honestly, when we have horror authors on, I pick their brains too. I ask them a ton of questions. So
hell yeah.
But
that's cool that you got picked up for your next one. That has to feel incredible, man.
Congrats. Oh, it was like, I'm like, I need to celebrate. It was a good feeling. And
you feel a new level of pressure now, or are you able to just sort of keep the same process that you used for the first one?
I don't feel really the pressure. It's I already knew the story in my head, so it's not like now I'm like, oh crap, I got to come up with an ending here. Like I already knew what I was doing on this book. And if the first one either didn't do well, or this was my first one, I would be shitting bricks right now, because I'd be like, I don't know if I can do this. I got imposter syndrome, like crazy. But the first books being so well received, it just gave me so much more confidence moving forward. So I don't know if it was going to be a one-hit wonder or what, but I'm really digging where this new book's going. And
that is so exciting.
And the fact that they accepted it off 10,000 words, knowing the book wasn't even done, like to me, that made me feel like, hey, they must really like this if they're willing to take it now. It's not even done yet. So,
for sure.
But yeah, so not that I'm anyone to give advice, but other writers have given me advice. It's just keep writing, whether you think it sucks or not. Get that on paper. That's what first drafts are for, because you can't edit something you don't finish. That's the bottom line. Is and there was a lot I fixed after the first draft that was just shit. So
I don't even know what draft I'm on now anymore. It took me about 4 months to do the first draft, which I had been given the advice to just put everything in it, turn it all up to 11, write as horrible, as lyrically, as over the top as you want, because none of it's going to stay, but get it all down there so you'll have it down. And that took about 4 months, and I thought I had really accomplished something, and then I had to realize this isn't good yet. You don't even know the voice you're using, and had to start over. And then I started over and wrote for another 4 months and realized this isn't very good either. Let's start it over. And I just kept staying with it, and finally I would say within the last 3 months, it's starting to feel like, oh, I can show this to someone now. This is getting close. It had a very similar feeling to the Bane lyrics, where the early drafts of any Bane song I ever wrote were garbage. I never wrote any song in 1 or 2 takes. They all took many, many, many drafts of constant editing. But slowly but surely it starts to get there. You start to trim away enough and like, yeah, this is starting to be what I was hoping it could sound like. And for the longest time, I didn't think I'd ever get there. It just felt too big, you know, like a novel and a song is like a universe away from each other. A song is fucking 1 page. But I just wrote every day. I had all the time in the world. The casino that used to suck up most of my time as a poker player has still not reopened. So I've just finally like found the rhythm to every single day. Just get in there and do it. Ernest Hemingway called it just get in there and chew on the nail, he would say.
Yeah.
Even if it's garbage, even if you're not happy with the work you did that day, you'll have done the work. And now I feel like there's a strange confidence that I've never had before. Like I can see how to fix sections. I can see that this, you know, I'm able to, even my reading, the way I'm attacking reading, I've always been a voracious reader, but it has changed. You know, it really has been affected by this process. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's reading books now too. I 100% agree. Just like picking it apart, not in a, like, I'm not sitting there bashing the book I'm reading, but like just figuring I'll read a book that I am like very excited to read and be like, what's working in this book? Like, what is it that's making this click right now? Cause I want that, you know, and, but yeah, typing the end on the first draft, that's whether it sucks or not, that's the best feeling in the world.
Cool. It's pretty
And
cool.
then, but having that self-awareness, right, of knowing, you know, that it may not be the best right away. Like there's a lot of writers out there that just, let's face it, you know, Amazon, you can publish anything you want now. They have their own print on demand system. You basically upload the manuscript in your cover, put your price in, they approve it, you're good to go. So there's people that literally don't even get it edited and they just post it. And so, you know, indie publishing had this like, you know, bad image for a lot of people because there's some shit out there that just gets put up there, you know. But if you put the time and effort in, if you get it edited, if you, like yourself, you're rereading it many times, you're fixing stuff, like that's all you can do, right? And then
for sure.
So to realize that it needs to work, you know, like I said, when I read the first draft of my book, I'm like there's some good stuff, but there's a lot of plot holes. And then what I would do is I would take a notepad and I wrote chapter by chapter. I would write chapter 1, this is what's accomplished. Chapter 2, this is what's accomplished. And I kept like a timeline going next to it. So, and I caught myself a few times where I'm like, shit, that was like 2 days later in this chapter. It should have been 1 day later. Like, so I'd have to go back and type the day differently or something, just like stupid little things, you know, that you wouldn't catch if you didn't like line it up like that. So,
well, it's constant, but I still, a list of like things I need to fix or things I need to do or things I need to remember is so long. And I just force myself to go through them every once in a while and find a few things that I can erase. Like we fixed that, or that's not a problem anymore. But it's still
I get the notepad basically on my phone notepad. That's like things to work on for draft 2. As I'm still typing draft 1, like I still have that going. Like, hey, we need to develop this character a bit more. We need to add more of a subplot to them. That like they need to have more purpose, or we need to make the main protagonist more sympathetic early on. You know, he's too boring. Like stuff like that. You know, just so you can.
I get it. For sure, man.
Yeah. So like the main character in Cursed Among Us he's an abused kid. And in the first draft, he was not abused. He just had a strict household. And I'm like, man, the main kid is the most boring. Like he needs more going on in his life that is stressful. And then it just made everything tie together. It made other characters with him tie together because one of the other main characters is very close with his dad. So the protagonist is a bit jealous of this kid because he has such a close knit relationship with his dad. So, so like the stuff that wasn't there through the first draft, just adding that one thing and like tweaking the dialogue from the dad to the son, and you know, so
the stuff spins off of that. I get it
exactly.
And
stuff clicks that you didn't even mean to click like later on. And I'd say the wildest part though through all of this process is people reaching out, like saying how a certain chapter impacted them, or a certain character getting killed off, they were pissed at me for it. Like, I'm like, really? Like, like there's a main character that gets killed off, you know, fairly early in the book, and they're like, why would you do that to him? Like, I thought he was going to be a big part of the book. And I'm like, that's why I did that. Like, I wanted that to just the rug to get ripped out from under you, you know?
Sometimes they just gotta go, man. Sometimes they're not meant for this world. I love that.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, this guy basically had all the answers for them. It would have been a boring book if he was still around. He needed to be taken out. So
I have no empathy for any of my guys. No.
Yeah. I viewed it like Game of Thrones. You know, I'm like, no one's safe here. Like, you know, I didn't read the Game of Thrones books, but I watched the show, and you know, they killed off, spoiler alert, one of the main characters in the first season. Like one of the bigger name actors in the show too, and I did not see it coming because I hadn't read the books. So I was like, "What the fuck? Like, why would they kill him?"
He's a savage. He'll kill a character off without a second thought. And I love him. For it.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
what is
got me going on writing?
That's okay. What's your book about, Aaron? Like, what genre are you working in?
It's about punk and skater kids growing up in Worcester in 1988. One summer of a group of very, very close friends, that sort of last summer before everything in your life changes. It's not autobiographical. None of the characters are based on real people. It's actually moved a few years into the future from the time where I was actually doing the things that these characters were doing. And all of the characters are, you know, versions of other people that I've known, but it's not autobiographical, and that none of these things actually ever happened.
Right.
Maybe save for a few things, but it all very easily could have happened. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It takes place in a city that I did grow up in, and they're skating in spots that I did skate in, and they attend one show that it was a show that I did attend in the summer of 1988. And yeah, it's just about like being 17 years old and being in love with music and skateboards, and what it feels like to get your heart broken, and what it feels like to have your friends leave for college and things like that.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I'm a sucker for like the coming of age type stories where it's just, you know, kids that, like A Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. Like, that's one of the best novels of all time. And yeah, it's so good. Okay. And he's a horror author, but that book's really not horror. It's really just about, you know, a kid one summer, and I think it's the 50s if I recall, but like, you know, the stuff he's it's huge. I forget exactly when it came out, but I highly recommend it. And then I'm reading a book right now called Sunray Alice, which I want to have that guy on the show too. And it's about it's going back and forth in time from when the Nazis, you know, were basically, it goes back to a prison camp where they had some Nazis held in the U.S., and some of them escaped. And it's this old lady, current time, who's telling someone about her living in that era when these escaped Nazis were in their town. And like, so it keeps going back and forth, and she's telling these stories about these escaped convicts basically, and it's freaking incredible. So yeah.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. So, but to your point, you know, my book's not autobiographical either, but you pull a lot from what you know, right? So you're pulling from the scene, you know, 100%. Like the main group of kids in my book is based off my friends. The main character is loosely based off me, but I was not abused. I was not an abused kid. My dad's going to be pissed when he reads it, because he's going to be like, what the hell? But it takes place in my hometown as well. And it, you know, all of the locations, the stuff like the ski jump, like all the stuff in that town is real.
You name certain streets and name certain places, like
I mentioned them, like mainly around the school area. But yeah, I mentioned a couple of the roads, a couple of the stores, like the video store that I grew up going to, the restaurant we used to all get breakfast at. Yeah. You know, stuff like that. But yeah, it's. I even named some of the teachers that were actually my teachers back in the 90s. I'm like, they're not gonna know, and they might be dead too. I don't know. But yeah, I had a blast doing that too, and it made a lot of people from my hometown buy the book because they were excited that Newport, New Hampshire has nothing.
Exactly.
So
That's been my thinking as well. As I'm like, I know there's some Bane fans and hardcore kids that will definitely read this. Hopefully, some skaters who may not care about Bane or me at all will read it just because it's very much about being a kid in love with skateboarding. And then when I did decide, you know what, I'm going to fucking set it in Worcester. I'm going to name places. I'm going to name street names. And then it hit me that there probably will be some people who will just want to read it for that reason. People who grew up in the 80s in Worcester that will be just excited to sort of get Trent, because Worcester is so different now than it was back then. But I still can remember pretty clearly what it was like back then and where certain stores were and things like that. And I think that I may have like a third 40 or 50 people that will pick the book up just for that reason,
Absolutely. People love nostalgia, so that's been one of the biggest things in the reviews for me is people saying how nostalgic it is and stuff. And like, I did that just because that's what I knew from the 90s, but I wasn't thinking this is going to sell me a ton of books. But like referencing Jenko jeans and shit like that, like people are like, yes, I love the Jenko jeans reference. I'm like, really? I can't that was in the 90s. That's what, that's, there's a story about a kid, the main character, who his dad tells him he can buy the jeans he wants if he saves up enough of his own money. Yeah. And then when he finally does and he comes downstairs in the pants, his dad's like, oh, fuck no. Like, you take those off. Like, and that really happened to me. Like, that was a real thing. My dad was like, no, you're not wearing those.
That's amazing. Yeah. We were all rocking those back in the 90s.
Everybody. And actually, that's what I mentioned in the book. I'm like, whether you were, punk rock or you were like the jock, like everyone wanted Jenkos back in the 90s. It didn't matter who you were. So
that brings up a funny question that I was going to ask. Just a good, perfect segue for this question. So I saw Bane play at the BFW at Haverhill, and Zach lost his pants that show in classic Zach fashion. And he kicked them off, and they went up into the ceiling tiles. And I'm wondering if to this day his pants are still in the ceiling tiles of the VFW in Haverhill.
They might be, man.
Yeah, that was hilarious. So just one motion, pants down, kicked off into the ceiling, gone. So.
Just play the rest of the show in his underwear. Is that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
That's awesome.
And that wasn't the only show I saw him lose his pants. So
I'll tell you this about Zach. He didn't become any calmer as we went on and got older. No. He stayed that lawless and that unhinged the entire ride. You just never knew if equipment was going to get smashed or if his clothes were going to get ripped off or something was going to get knocked over. He just fucking never settled down. It was so fun to be in a band with that kid.
Yeah, total energy bomb, and he's bringing it, man, with Silent Drive. What a fantastic album! Like, I want to plug that.
Great, right?
Holy shit, dude! I honestly haven't been that excited for a new album in a long time since probably Don't Wait Up. So, I was super excited for that album. It just crushed.
Make it down to Worcester for the show this month, man. Come down.
Sold out. It's sold out. It's sold out. I was going to, but it's sold out. So, I don't know. Damn. Yeah. Maybe I'll have to see if I can find a scalper on the street or something. Yeah.
Did it sell out?
Yeah, all of their shows have sold out. They played in like Connecticut. They're doing one in Connecticut too. It's done, sold out. It's like, holy shit. It's good for them. Yeah, man. Like, that's awesome. It's totally cool. So yeah, I highly recommend that album. What has it been, 18 years since their last one? Something like that. I mean,
yeah, it sounds about right. I know it was a long time in the making. I mean,
yeah. And Pete's in the band too, which is great. So that's awesome.
He's been in it the whole way through. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Good for him to be fucking playing music again, man.
It sounds great. I mean, I was like, holy shit, this is a good album. Like, yeah, the whole thing's solid the whole way through. Sometimes you get little peaks and valleys with some albums. Like, no, this thing's pretty good. So
talented bunch of guys. Silent Drive for sure.
I don't know if Joel's just.
I was going to ask with the go back to writing for a moment.
Did we lose him?
It froze, Joel. He lives out in the woods of New Hampshire here, so this happens every once in a while if a cloud passes over.
So what's Deadball then? What's the premise to that? That's fascinating to me.
Well, and that's it's another example of how connected Joel and I are unintentionally, because like we both are huge baseball fans. We always have been. And I started coming up with this idea for a baseball story because you don't see that really. So I'm like, that'd be cool to have the main character, a baseball player. Maybe not have it be all baseball scenes and stuff like that, but he's just a baseball player that bad shit happens to. So I started coming up with this idea, and then randomly, like when Joel and I were talking, he's like, I wanted to do a baseball comic called Dead Ball, and I was like, he's like, I want it to take place during the dead ball era, the early 1900s, and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, dude, my story wasn't in the past; it was modern times, but that actually kind of adds a bit of eeriness to it to make it back then. So I was like, that's a cool idea. And I had these main villains in my head, but he just randomly mentioned, it'd be cool to have carnies tied in somehow too, like these evil carnies. And I'm like, shit, like this could work. Like, so I just took the idea I had and I put it back in the 1900s, and it's about this. It's like a deal with the devil type scenario. This baseball player who's at the top of his game. He's about to sign a huge contract. He's in debt to the mob, which you don't really find out in book one. It's kind of hinted at that he needs money, but he's in debt. He's at the top of his career, about to sign this huge contract for back then, and then his career gets taken away from him, the dirty play. So he just goes in this downward spiral, drinking. His wife's pregnant with their second kid, and he just gets in an argument with her one night drinking, and leaves the house, and just happens to see. He goes down to the ball field to just reminisce, drinking out of his flask, and he sees the carnival across the street. And he just walks over and, does his thing, drinking or whatever, and then sees, a magic show. I'm pretty much telling you all of issue one, so probably not the best explanation here, but
to get the thing away.
Basically, yeah, he makes a deal with the devil situation. They offer to help heal his injury for a favor or return favor in the future, and he just agrees to it. He's like, yes, give me back my life. And book one picks up, like page one takes place in the future, like when they're coming for their return. So you don't even know what's going on. Like it's showing their house. And he's like, they're here. And you see this dark silhouette here in the doorway. And you're like, what the hell? What's happening right now? So basically the whole first half of the book is them coming for their return favor and him fighting it, and then it flashes back to the baseball scenes for how they got to this point. So
I see. Then you get the backstory.
So, and I had this idea that I wanted to start right in the thick of it, and then go back and explain why. And I thought it would be super cool to in Ruggiero, he did it in one spot there where it transitions from past to present or vice versa, but it's legit like the same panel, just a different scene, if that makes any sense. So with the main character Ted getting knocked out, and then you turn the page and it's the same image, but it's a different background, and it's him knocked out on the baseball field or whatever, and trying to figure out, so you see it going back and forth. But but he just finished issue 2. He's got it all done. So now we just got to get it colored and lettered, and
so only one issue is out now.
Yeah.
Cool.
With our day jobs, we're putting a couple books out a year at this rate. Unfortunately, we would love to do more, but although Ruggerio's a freaking machine, that guy, we were like, damn, he finished that book much faster than we thought he was going to. But that's not a bad thing.
How do you get into the comic shops? Is that hard to do?
I think we haven't really attempted that yet, because we want to have the whole series done first, because then, or at least most of the series, so we have a back catalog where we can say, hey, we'll give you a book each month, basically, until it's done. Because there's comic shops around here that will carry indie. So I know without a doubt we'll get into at least a handful of shops. But we have it on our website. And then once they're all done, we can put up a trade edition, like a graphic novel on Amazon. So, But yeah, we've done fairly well with selling like the collector's editions, like the signed limited numbered editions. And then we had our Kickstarter and stuff like that. But
did Kickstart? You did a Kickstarter for it?
Not for Dead Ball. We did it for our first comic book. But we're going to be setting one up for Dead Ball soon with issues 1 and 2. So
I've been wondering if I'm going to go that same road, like what I'm going to do, like to publish this novel. If I'm going to do a Kickstarter with signed copies or what, I'm not sure, but I've been trying not to think about it, trying to just like get this thing,
get it done,
and then start worrying about it. But now it's starting to feel like my imagination is starting to stray to what it will actually be like when this is done, because
So we'll give you some tips offline how to get ahead
That
of
would
that.
be
Eric.
good to hear. I would
Yeah.
really like to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a couple of little things that you can do there as well.
The
Yeah.
Kickstarter's tough. It's a lot of work. Not just pumping it up and constantly promoting it and setting up the page and all that, but then fulfilling it, right? Because then, like Joel and I had to get together. We were together for what, like 10 hours one day, just packaging up all the comic stuff to mail out to the backers.
15 hours that day or something. We worked like straight
it was
through.
something like, it was a crazy day. And so it was a lot of work. I think, some people they'll use like what's it called, backer kit or something like that, where they basically have this company do all that work for them.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of a cut they take, but I would be willing to give them my kidney if they would do that for us. Because
you remember the days there, right? Packing 7-inch, right, and mailing them out.
We went through it last summer. I don't know if you knew, but last summer, our friend, a member of Bane, Stu, he passed away. He had pancreatic cancer and he died. And we put out an "I'm with Stu" T-shirt to benefit his family. And with that, we figured we might as well get rid of all the old Bane merch that we had laying around for past 5 years since the last show. Put that online, and it exploded. Like, we sold so much shit that we were like, well, fuck it, let's just print more. Like, let's not only sell what we have, let's allow kids to order more of these shirts, and we'll just get more printed. And decided we were going to do it all ourselves. We weren't going to pay a middleman so that we could give Stu's family the most amount of money, as opposed to having to give a merch company, 20% or whatever. So we did it ourselves, and it was an overwhelming number of orders that we had to fill. And then the hoodies all got fucked up. The hoodies were all mis-sewn. So like it went on for months, and there were several 10-hour days with all of us out in a fucking driveway packing orders. And it really did. It gave me the chutzpah to be like, I am going to put my novel out myself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to fucking not even shop this around to punk rock publishers, who I'm pretty sure would take it just because, you know what I'm saying? Of like a record label would put out a book. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to do all the work. I'm going to fucking figure out a place to have these books sent. And I'm going to sit there and I'm going to fucking send them all out. And I'm going to make all the money, because this is as hard as I've individually ever worked on anything in my life. But I don't really know how I'm going to do it, So it would be good to get some advice on the side from you guys.
Sure, absolutely.
You did your novel yourself, or did you do all the shipping and everything yourself?
No, so Amazon, I could talk to you about that too. Like, if you're uploading through Amazon, like, they do all that shit, for you. It's print on demand. So I mail out the autographed author copies. Like, I had multiple shipments sent to me of like 50 to 75 books that I would just sign and physically mail out myself with like bookmarks and stickers and stuff. So I did that. That was a lot of work, but if someone orders on Amazon, that comes right from Amazon. So like, that's why you're seeing so many small indie publishers out there now, because there's no overhead. Like, they literally can sign an author to a book, it's called KDP. It's Kindle Direct Publishing. You upload the manuscript to Amazon with the cover. It's all you got to get it formatted. And legit, they approve it after you enter all the stuff, like type up the description of the book, put the price in, do whatever you got to do, right? And then after it's approved, it's there on whatever launch day you really want it to be there. And so you're seeing all these indie publishers, like, they wouldn't be able to thrive, if they had to have some printer send them hundreds of books. Like, they would have so much overhead and probably spend so much money on it. But now it's, you sign an author, you pay for the cover cost, the cover art, the editing, the formatting, and then you just take half the profit basically from there. So like, as long as you have enough money up front and you make that back, you don't have to worry about that. Amazon will send it to everyone, and they have different locations all over the world. So so I noticed like this one, it tells me this is just one of my like proof copies, but it tells me it was printed, I think, in Rhode Island. Where is it? Sorry, this is really nerdy stuff here. Sorry. So yeah. Sorry, yeah, Delaware, April 8th, 2022, printed in Delaware. So like, they'll find a close place, and they'll send it from there to the closest zip code. They base it off their zip code or whatever. So
it's bound nice. The book is put
oh,
together.
dude, yeah, it's beautiful. This is a matte cover. So I actually had the gloss cover on my real one, which I don't have one sitting next to me, but actually. No, I don't.
You always have everything sitting next to you, John.
Yeah, they're in front of me. I'd have to get up. Actually, I can reach around as long as you don't mind seeing my shoulder. Yeah. So this is the real one right here. See, I did the gloss instead of the matte cover. But yeah, it looks great. And then I had it formatted professionally, which that's an extra couple $100 that if you can teach yourself to format, you can save that money easy. But like you can't see it. Yeah, it looks legit. Let me try to. Like they did this cool thing where the first page of each chapter is like darkened and it has like a picture of a heart. So it's pretty cool. It's legit. You wouldn't know that this is an indie published book, like just looking at it. But I paid this cover artist to do the whole wrap around like the front and back.
Sure.
And so the money I put out up front was for the cover, for the editing. Like editing's huge. Like that's actually something I've been complimented on, is how well edited it is, and it doesn't seem like an indie book or a first novel because it reads so well. And I'm like, that's my editor, man. Like, he switched so many sentences around, like words that should have been in different spots, like because of just how my brain writes.
He could just see that this sentence would be stronger if this part of it was.
The subject should be at the end of the sentence, not the beginning. Like the first sentence of the book, he's like, this is a powerful sentence, but we're moving this to the end because that makes it even more powerful, So
let me ask you, was there some stuff he pushed for that you pushed back on, that you were like, actually, this needs to be this way because of this? Or
so
any idea he had, you basically went with?
Well, that's what's crazy. And, I paid him. So my initial thought,
all this was not like, this isn't a guy who's going to go easy on you for any reason whatsoever.
That's where I'm headed here, is like, this guy's out of the UK. He's not my friend. I don't even know him. He's a professional editor. Yeah. And so my first imposter syndrome thought was like, I paid the guy, so he's just making me feel good about myself. And I'm like, no, he's an editor. Like, he's going to tell me if this is shit. And because he told me up front, he's like, I usually cut 10% of manuscripts, just so you know, like there's too much fluff in there. Like I cut 10% of it out. And I'm like, oh, great. And he only cut 500 words. And he gives commentary throughout. He highlights the stuff that he's fixing, and he's like, you can go with it if you want, or you don't have to. But what I paid him for was just line editing to make sure grammar and all that stuff was good. And then I also paid him.
So he also did a degree of spell checking for you as well. Like that was.
I mean, yeah, and obviously, like I spell checked it on my Word document, but like
just like also
some stuff still slips through the cracks even after him. Like even like my beta readers were like, "Hey, I don't know if you caught this one." I'm like, "Ah, shit." Yeah. So actually, even on the final edition, my wife caught one that is gonna just like eat at me for the rest of my life.
The rest of your life, exactly.
I'll even tell you what it is. I don't know what page it's on, but
you don't have to tell me. Don't tell me.
No, it's hilarious because if you read it, you'll find it and you'll crack up because it's when she read it to me, it even took me a minute. I'm like, so what's wrong with that? And I'm like, oh God. It was supposed to say, a tall glass of water. And I said a glass of tall water, and it slipped through. But no one spotted that except her. And I'm like, damn it. It's there now. Like,
did you ever jumble lyrics like that live, Aaron? Like accidentally, like miss a line?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there were times where I just would just go completely blank. Where I would be like,
man,
I've sang this song for the last 15 nights, and for some reason on this night something caught my eye or my brain went somewhere else and I couldn't remember. Bane was very fortunate in that kids tended to sing our lyrics, so I could always make it through to the next one. But there would be times where I would be just like lost. It would be like, this song isn't brand new, dude. You've been playing this song for 10 years. How did you forget that? It's kind of flighty that way.
Yeah, it happens. Especially I was the drummer, so you miss you hit something, or your stick catches an edge, man, or catches a cymbal, or a head breaks or it's just shit happens. You just roll with it. So just roll with it. It's all good. I wanted to ask too.
You pass it off to how many beta readers did you ask? Like, give this a once over for grammar.
I honestly, I was doing it all like out of my ass. Like I had no idea what I was doing, but when I finished the book, when I got the final draft from the editor, I was like, all right, I could release this next week if Amazon would put it through, but I'm like, I want to give a couple months for advanced reader copies to go out so I can get some early reviews, maybe get some buzz if they like it. And at that point, my editor had really liked it. So I'm like, I felt a bit better about it, and I gave myself 3 months, and I went on some of these horror groups, and I was like, hey, and the cover caught their eye. So I give my cover artist credit all the time because they're like, that cover's awesome. What's this book about? I've already used him for my next cover. So, and I paid for the second cover before I got published. And the publisher I got accepted by has their cover artist. They use him for every book. And I'm like, please let me use the cover I already paid for. I was like, this cover inspired the freaking book. Like it would be awful if I couldn't use this cover. And she was like, yeah, absolutely. So the cover caught their eye in these groups, and I expected to send like 20 copies out, digital copies. I wasn't going to send physical copies. Sure. And I had like over 100 people private messaging me, and I'm like, holy shit. Like, I don't want to give 100 copies away. I think I ended up giving like 50 copies away, digital copies. My wife was like, don't you think that's like, is that bad? Like you're giving 50 books away. And I'm like, if all I'm trying to do is sell 50 books, I shouldn't be doing this. Like this is to get me reviews for later on, and I talked to some authors that were like, man, advanced reader copies, like the beta readers, like half of them don't even read it. You never get reviews. It's not worth your time. And I almost didn't do it. And I'm like, I'm going to do it anyways. And it freaking, it made everything for me because they were posting in these groups about the book. Like I had like 30 something Goodreads reviews before the book even released. Like that's some people are like decent indie authors that don't do that. Like there's one I follow on Twitter and he's trying to get to 20 reviews on a book that came out last year. And I'm like he's way more known than I am. How is this even a thing? Like I have 70, I just got hit 75 reviews today on Goodreads, like in a month. I'm like, that's not because I'm like this stud. Like I just put the effort in up front to get that, So I just would say, don't worry about giving too much of them, Okay. So, if you give 20, 30, 50, however many it is, like if you're confident in the book, like that's all you can ask for. So,
I mean, I just want as many people to catch those little typos as possible. I want to like have as many people not even intentionally proofread it, but just sort of naturally be like, oh, there's some commas here. I need all of that,
When that's what happened, like I had already had it professionally edited. So I wasn't expecting to get like a list of things to send the formatter to say, hey, can you fix that word for me? Because the formatter basically shrinks it down to book page size for you because it's on a Word document. So it needs to get formatted to fit in a book. And he did the cool graphics and all that on the inside pages and stuff. But so every time I would get a typo, he'd be like, hey man, just wait for a bunch of these readers to get back to you so you can send me a list instead of telling me every single one. So I sent him like 15 of them, like after it was edited. This was after like 20 something readers. And it would be something so small that only one of them caught. I will not one of the errors was a repeat. That was what was wild, is that they were all individual things that different people caught. And I'm like, damn,
mind blowing.
Yeah. And it was always something so ridiculous. I gave an ARC copy, an advanced reader copy to another horror author at a convention, and he loved the book. But he's like, I don't want to be a dick, but he's like, when you are spelling the word pus, it's only one S. Like you're spelling it puss, like PUSS. And he's like, I didn't even know that. My editor told me that. I would use PUSS. And I'm like, I didn't would have never crossed my mind, but that got through everybody except for him. And so I had to have that fixed. Just little things like that, that most people wouldn't even catch. But
catch it though. It's my great fear right now. It's too much of that, really. Because if it looks amateurish, no one's going to take it very serious,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, even Stephen King, I've caught like spelling error or like one grammar issue in a book, so it happens even to the best of them. But obviously, you want to just get as many of them out as you can and just have it as ready as possible, But
did you have friends read it before it was done? Was there a time where you were like letting some people read a section of it to sort of give you the gas?
Kinda, not. I was like sending, like there was a couple of my friends that are horror fans that I would send like a chapter to here and there, but most of them pissed me off because they were like, "Man, I don't want to be spoiled. I want to read it all." I'm like, "No, I need your opinion here. Like, I like
tell me this is fucking good."
Yeah, like, like I don't want to read that part. I want to wait till I get the whole book. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, I need the feedback. Does this chapter like spook you, or does it like, do what it's supposed to? So, but not many. No, not until the advanced readers for reviews. But again, at that point, my editor liked it enough that I was like I said at first, I'm like, yeah, he's gonna say that I paid him to, and I'm like, no, if it sucked, he would tell me. Like, he legit thinks it's a good book, so screw it. Like, I'm like, that's when I went on these groups and I was like, who wants to read this and give it for an honest review? Like, I'm not asking for 5 stars. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I just want the reviews in there,
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I didn't really. My wife doesn't really read horror, so she read the book after it was done, but like I wasn't having her read it and seeing if it worked,
And it's hard to believe, the person who loves you more than anything in the world. It's just so hard to believe that it's as good as they are telling you. It's so fucking.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too, right? Yeah, is you think they're just gonna pat your back, So, but I have one good friend that I was sending. He was okay with me spoiling stuff, and I didn't necessarily send him the actual chapter, but I would say, hey, this is what's gonna happen in this chapter. And he's like, he would be like, oh, that sounds so cool, so yeah, I'm very self-aware though, so like I would read it out loud and I'd be like, that sentence sounds stupid, like I need to freaking fix how that's written. And even now, to be honest, like when I read it, I'm like, I would have done that different now, but
there's a time where you got to let it go, right? They're just
gotta,
you got it.
Yeah, exactly.
I keep telling myself that eventually you're going to have to stop all these shenanigans and just put out there, man, because you can stay in that cycle forever, right? You can just
absolutely
just tinkering, and then you realize I'm changing it back to how it was 2 weeks ago. I'm in a fucking hell cycle right now. At some point, you have to step away.
Yeah, and I have like horror author friends who like take a couple years to write a book, because they are so tedious with it all. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but like I kind of just took that advice of just freaking get it done. And then, I went through like 4 edits myself before I gave it to an editor. Like the second draft, I was looking for typos and stuff. The third draft, that's where I lined up all the chapters and was like, all right, I need to add something here or do this. And then the fourth one was really just a comb through to make sure, all right, it's good to hand to an editor now, or as best as I'm going to do on my own. I'm not an editor. So, but yeah, I wrote from first draft to final print of the proofs was like mid-September to March. And I guess like that's kind of quick, I guess. I don't know. Like it just
that's incredibly quick. That's very fast.
And then I've written the 50,000 words in this next book. I mean, I started that. I don't even see I'm terrible about this. Most authors will put their start date and end date, and I'm like, shit, I just got to guesstimate because I forgot to write when I started writing this book. But this one's gone a little bit slower because I've been pushing this other book first, obviously. So I've been writing a bit less, focusing on the promotion of the first book. But still, yeah, I don't know. I just it's kind of like diarrhea of the fingertips, like just go, even if it sucks. I'm just like, yeah, I'll fix that on the next round. And then the tricky part though is like you're like, oh shit, like that's a plot hole. Should I just wait until the second draft and then fix that, like for the story moving forward, or should I just like an example in the book I'm writing is like I thought of something really cool that would make it all fit together better that I need to go back and put earlier in the book. But I'm like, no, I'll do that on the second draft. But I'm writing the rest of the book as if I've already done that, So, so anyone, if they read the first draft, they'd be like, that doesn't make sense. But that's because I have to go back and add something to make it make sense.
I mean, I haven't let anyone read it. I have a few close writer friends that are like, I'll read anything. Let me read it. We talk about the book. I'm very interested in their work, and they're eager to read the first few chapters, but I just don't feel ready. It's just not. Yeah. But it's starting to get there, and I think I'm going to let 4 or 5 friends whose opinions aren't going to sway me too strongly one way or the other just read it just to tell me, like, do you want to know the rest? Do you even care what comes with this 100 pages?
And as long as you got, like, I mean, obviously with your background, I'm sure you have somewhat thick skin at this point, right? Like, if someone told me they didn't like it, I wouldn't be like, fuck, I can't do this. I'm not a writer. Like, I just be like, it's not for you, But
I don't think it's going to be a great novel. I read that David Mamet made some statement. He said, you have to write a bad novel. You've got to get your bad novel out of you so you can get on to the good ones. And I've sort of kept that close to me through this whole process, that, like, this is a learning experience. This is, a very easy story for me to tell as far as the characters and the dramatic arc I really, really believe in. So a lot of the stuff is there, but the actual writing, the actual prose, like the style of it I'm floundering, I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go along, and I'm going to put it out there because I know there are a few people who will read it just based on their fanship of the band or whatever. And I'll be able to say that I did it, and then I'll take that and learn whatever I'm going to learn. I don't know what's waiting for me on the other side of this. I'm trying not to even imagine it, but I'm just going to put it out. I'm going to punk rock it the way I did with all my bands. Fucking get it out. We'll see.
I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, man. I think it's going to be epic. I think you're being a little bit humble. So I think everything you've ever done is freaking killer. So,
it's nice of you to say that. I mean, one thing that was very consistent through the end of Bane was people pulling me aside and saying, please tell me you'll continue to write. You've got to keep writing. You've got to write. That definitely propelled me to get to this point, this feeling that, like, people will read it. People care about what you have to say on the page. Like, write something. So we'll see. We're going to see what happens.
Yeah.
It's fucking so thankless, man. The journey is so insane. When you're in a band, you write a song, you put the record out, 4 months later, you play the songs, and there are kids screaming these words back at you, and at the end of it, they're hugging you covered in sweat, telling you how much that song meant to them. So there's like an instant gratification that just doesn't exist in writing a novel. Like,
I'll be cooking breakfast, this is no lie, and like I'll be like swan song lyrics will come into my head, and I'll be like singing to my daughter making eggs. So just that's it, man. I mean, it's all there.
A much less lonely road when you can just fucking write the song, put it out there, and kids will tell you if they like it or not immediately. You will be told, did you like the writing that we did?
That's awesome.
You
got Joel, right? Sorry, I was going to say Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, he writes comics and novels. And I saw an interview with him where they asked him, do you prefer writing comics or novels? And he said, honestly, if I could make a living off doing comics, I would do that, because exactly what you just said. He's like, writing a novel is one of the loneliest freaking professions in the world, because you're constantly battling with yourself all day. Like, you don't have that camaraderie with anyone. Like, when you're doing a comic, you're talking to the illustrator, you're talking to the letterer. You're like,
I didn't even think about that. You're not alone. That's dealing with the ink artist and the line drawer. I didn't even think about that.
We have our group chat. We're like, bouncing stuff off all day. Like, Joel and I, when we started Livid, we've kind of tamed off a bit, going to bed a little earlier now. But like, we were up to like 2 a.m. a lot of the nights, just like texting about our book. Like, send just one panel of a comic book that he drew, and it was like, yes, this is awesome.
Right.
So writing a book, you don't have that. So
dude, it is lonely as hell, and the characters are always in your head. You're always with these fucking kids, sitting in a movie, distracted the whole time with your own story, and nobody understands what you're going through. It's crazy.
Oh, that's like, so in my dedication in the book, I dedicate, or I in my acknowledgments, I thanked my family and my wife and my kids. And I said, because I literally don't write during family time. Like I write when they're sleeping, or I write on my lunch breaks, or I write if I have downtime on my day job. Like I never am just sitting upstairs writing with the kids running around like nut jobs. So I acknowledged that. I said, thank you. I know I don't write, when it's family time, but let's face it, my brain is constantly in that world. Like even if I'm sitting up at the dinner table and I'm like trying to think of the next spot in the book, and I've made the joke on the show before. My wife will be like, "Did you take the trash out?" And I'm like, "No, but I thought of this cool story idea." So your brain's just always there.
That stuff, man. It's just so nice to hear you say that stuff. That has been my life for 2 years now.
Yep.
Yeah.
We had horror author Alan Baxter on. He's out of Australia, and he told us, I'll never forget this because that's how I feel. Is his wife, who's a painter, she will walk by his office and she'll go to say something, and she'll be like, he'll just be sitting there staring at the ceiling, and she'll be like, "You're working," and then just walk away. Like she knows he's like just thinking of scenes in his head, like just sitting there staring at the wall.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bug him.
I heard a story once about a writer. I can't remember who the writer was, but he was with his wife and they were at some cocktail party, and somebody was telling them both a story or whatever, and they realized that the author wasn't listening at all. He just was not plugged in, completely zoned out. And his wife said to the guy, "Don't mind him, he's writing."
Yeah, so true.
When you guys
like everything you see too, right? Like everything is like a scene or like you're driving in traffic, and like I had a book idea come to me when I was stuck in traffic driving home from work one night. Like, man, what if up ahead of me there was a sinkhole and this freaking monster was coming out and I just don't even know it yet, and it's just gonna like block the highway and kill everybody? Like, just stuff like that. Like you're just sitting there thinking of like, why is traffic right now? Like, what's going on up ahead of me? Yeah.
The thing that struck me is a lot of the advice that I read was like, just get writing, write every day, get in there, do the process, and you'll be surprised. They said the characters will just start doing things on their own, which seemed absurd to me. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But it really happened as you get used to just being around them day after day, and you continue to go back and do the work every single day. They really do start to like do things on their fucking own, which was mind blowing to me.
It is cool. Yeah, I don't outline necessarily. Like I have an idea of where I want things to go, but I would put a rough outline of what I wanted to happen, for the next like 10 chapters. So I just had an idea of where I was headed, and I would get to like the 4th chapter into that little outline. I'd be like, no, that character wouldn't do that. Like, or they can't do that now because I already put them in this hole, so they can't actually accomplish that now. Right. So yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see it, but
it is cool.
I have no emotional connection to my characters though. Like I will kill anybody. So just
same here.
That's what you got to do.
We're really sweet kids, and I just put them in the worst situations, in the worst.
Yeah.
When you start writing the songs, just for Bane, would they do the music first? You put the lyrics to it, or was the lyrics there, then it wrote to it, or was it kind of a conjoined effort?
They were usually done pretty separately. There would be some lyrics that I would have that I would know like needed to be put to a certain sort of song tonally, like some lyrics I would be, this needs to be something very upbeat and spirited where there's going to be room for sing-alongs and that type of things. Then there would be other more sort of maybe a little more avant-garde stuff that I wrote that I knew probably wouldn't necessarily work with those type of very sort of spirited songs. So I would keep that in wait for something, because I always knew that we would do something a little left field. Zach was always good for doing something that was off the beaten path. So, but there was, I never like brought a song home and wrote lyrics based on how that music made me feel. I wrote what I wanted to write, knowing that it was going to be written for my band and knowing sort of what the parameters of my band were. But they were usually done pretty separately. And I usually don't get writing until we've decided we're going to write songs. I would never write a lyric just because like, oh, I felt like writing a song today. Any lyric that I ever wrote existed because if I didn't do it, I would be disappointing their efforts as musicians. Like I needed them to fucking light that fire under my ass to force me to be creative. None of these songs that some people tell me are very, very well written would exist if it wasn't because those guys had written the lyrics. Those things weren't going to come out of me just sitting around one day feeling like, oh, let me write a song. I did it solely because it was time for us to start writing music again.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, for sure. I had a question from somebody that asked me before. Is there any other like merchandise from back in the day that's still around, or did you guys get rid of all that stuff? Was one. And do you recall what the earliest T-shirt was, the design?
Yeah, I do. I can answer both of those. As far as old merch, we don't keep a sort of collection of that stuff. There was some stuff that was carried over at the end of the band after our very final show. There was leftover merch, both from the tour we had just come off and maybe some previous tours that just we hadn't sold out of everything. Those things sat in boxes for years until last summer when we put them all online along with the I'm with Stu shirts. And then got so many orders that we had to print more. So now there's a small collection of leftovers from that order. And we've recently reordered hoodies. And I think that's it as far as like stuff that you could get through us. Now, does Equal Vision Records continue to put Bane shirts in their merch store? I can't answer that. I would assume that they probably do. I don't really go looking or fishing around for that stuff. But if he's looking for like an old specific design, we don't have that for sure. Yeah. And as for the first Bane shirt ever, I remember the design. I wish I could remember the artist's name because you might even know him, as he was very much a part of that sort of Merrimack Valley community of like Converge, Cave-In kids. I don't remember his name. Aaron Dahlbeck would remember it. But it's a drawing, a very striking drawing of two characters getting ready to punch each other. They have ties on, and then Bane has in the logo, there's like a smoking revolver, written with the logo. That's the very first
light blue, and it was printed on light blue, and I had that shirt. I had it, and I actually had to sell a lot of my stuff because I fell on hard times, man. And I sold a whole bag of just T-shirts to pay for heating oil to keep my family warm, So been there, done that. I lost it, so I hope the guy still has it because I had that shirt. So I know it very.
That's the very first Bane shirt.
Yeah,
it's cool, man. I'm very sort of kind of salty, curmudgeon, social media guy. Do not really spend much time interacting in comment sections and all that stuff. Yeah. Pretty infuriating to me, but I keep hold of my Instagram because every once in a while I'll get tagged in an old Bane shirt or an old sticker or something, and just love seeing people open up their archives and put them on the internet. So every once in a while I'll see, like recently saw a photo of that T-shirt and was just like, wow, man, that was the first shirt. I think all sizes total came in one box that we just brought to the space that night, and they were probably gone that day, and we never printed them again. Honestly, it's cool that you have it.
I had it. Yeah, I sad it had to go, but I had to do what I had to do, right? So
I didn't keep anything. I never none of the Bane stuff came with me. I've actually been in a phase this year where I have a shoebox full of like tour laminates or old flyers, letters kids have written me, train tickets or movie tickets that we saw a movie in England or something. I would keep that. And I realized that I had a lot of drafts of the lyrics, like original drafts. And I started sending those to kids. I was like, I'm not going to keep these in a shoebox, and they don't bring me any joy having them. So I've just been like sending them off to people who really cared about Bane, who I thought maybe it would make their day and stuff.
Oh shit, that's awesome.
Yeah.
There's people that really dig that stuff, man. And that's the one. My good friend that's asking these questions. He's kind of an audiophile too. So I mean, he just loves live footage, things like that. Are there any like Pro Shot early era, like pre-2000 Bane things out there that maybe aren't in circulation yet that you're aware of, or anything like that?
As far as like cool video,
it's like, because you got to think too, like for John and younger people, there wasn't cell phones back then, so it was people with camcorders and things. So I didn't know if you were aware of anything that's just like sitting out there that hasn't been put out that you know, because he loves that stuff.
No, the guys who did the Bane doc a couple years ago, they had to go through the unenviable task of trying to track down as much of that sort of stuff as possible. And I was not able to be helpful to them at all. I'm like in awe anytime anything, like, because, you know, every once in a while somebody will send me a YouTube video, even of bands that I was in before Bane, like my 80s hardcore bands, and just be like, how does this exist? Who found this and uploaded this?
Like on an old crank camera, like filming it.
That's what's wild, right? Like, I can't think of who it was, but like my wife and I watch a lot of band documentaries, and just like there was one band, I can't remember who it was, but like they had so much footage of like when they were just starting out, like who knew they were going to be anything at that point, you know? And they got all this footage of them. Yeah, like someone thought to like follow them around and just film all that. You know what I mean? Like that.
People are just really aware that this moment needs to be captured, and Bane was not that band. Even when we were doing "Don't Wait Up," which was our final record, a big fanfare record, which we recorded when cell phones were readily available. All of the technology we have was available then, and we didn't have any cameras going while we were in the studios. There are so few photos of us recording this pretty important record to us. We just thought, oh, we need to capture this. There's a kid, his name is Pat, from a band called Have Heart. He came in and sang his verse one night. Came in, he's a teacher, and he came straight from work, still in his shirt and tie, walked immediately into the studio and just like spit out this beautiful verse, killed it for us in one take. And none of us thought to like, let's get this on our phone. Like we all just stood and watched. Just like nothing exists. Like nothing. Even when the doc was getting put together, he was like, don't you guys have anything? Is there any video footage of you recording Don't Wait Up? And we were all just like, no.
In some ways it's kind of unfortunate, but some ways I kind of appreciate it at the same time. Yeah, it's kind of cool, like because everything gets captured these days, right? So I wanted to make it a point too to ask you about the process of writing Don't Wait Up and what that was like for you guys, knowing that was your last album and being there and putting that together. Take us through like how that, you know, since we can't see what was in the studio, what those conversations were like and what the emotions were like.
Yeah, it was wild, man. I'll tell you the whole story. It starts several years before we even start writing for that record, where there is a moment where Bane isn't bringing kids out the way we used to, even at home, even like on a Thursday night at the Palladium, us headlining, there would be a couple hundred kids there, and it felt very strange. And we were just struggling. Like we hadn't put out a record in a long time. It was probably 3 years, let's say, after the Note had come out. We just weren't a very prolific band when it came to writing, and we had spent most of our money on tour, and we were starting to lose steam a bit. And we're playing the show at the Palladium, and it's pretty bleak. And I say something between songs. I don't know what made me say it, but I say, this is an old one. It's called Superhero. Might be the last time we ever play it. This might be the last time you ever play the song. And the place goes crazy. Suddenly the whole place kind of comes to life, and they're all singing. And it's stuck in the back of my mind that if you dangle that idea in front of kids, that they'll respond to it. So now we got to fast forward, let's say 4 more years. Still haven't put out a record. We did put out a series of 7 inches. Sure. And we're now getting older, got kids, got families. We're starting to realize that like we at least need to start to have the conversation about this band probably can't go on forever. It's getting harder to do tours. Some people wanted to do it on a bit more of a part-time basis. Some of us, myself being one of them, just didn't know how to slow down. I'd only known how to keep one pace. And I was very stubborn. I was very sort of had a fight or flight in me where if I didn't get my way, I kind of threatened to run, or a lot of regret with the way things played out there. But anyway, we start to have conversations about maybe this should be it. Maybe we should figure out a way to end this band. And that night, that Superhero thing kind of comes into my brain as like, what if we just like really dangle the idea that this is it, that we're going to make one more record and we're going to do one more sort of round of touring, and then we're going to say goodbye, and everyone's going to know when the goodbye is. Like we had a 2-year cycle from when Don't Wait Up came out to when our final show would be. And it just seemed like everyone kind of get reinvigorated, reinterested, like right from the gate, we would have the excitement or the interest of people because we were dangling this idea of this is it in front of their eyes. It was a very big mistake. I'm telling the story like it's a brilliant actor. We did. It's okay. I fucking regret all of it. And if I could go back to that conversation, if I could get into a time machine and go back, I would scream at them, don't do this. Anyway, we do it. We say, yeah, let's do it. We'll announce that it's the final record, and I will write lyrics that are very much facing the idea of this coming to an end. We'll even name the record something that alludes to this is coming to an end. And then we will tour for 2 years. We'll go out, do a real circuit of touring, go everywhere in the world one more time. Europe and the US, I think we did 2 more times. But like Japan and South America and Australia and Southeast Asia, all those places, we let them know we want to come there and do our farewell tour. And before all of that, now we have to write this fucking record. And for the previous record and the previous 7 inches, Don't Wait Up, and the EPs that came out after that, we were kind of far flung, living in different places. I was living in Baltimore. Dahlback was somewhere out west, I think New Mexico. So the songwriting was a little different in that guys would get together and write the music, and then I would come home and record the songs and fit lyrics on my own. And there weren't a lot of very dedicated like band rehearsals. The way Give Blood was written in a way that we were all centralized in Massachusetts. Everyone had to be at practice every fucking week, contributing to the writing of this record. And I think it shows in Give Blood and sort of the immediacy of that record. It is very much of 5 people all on the same page, working very hard towards the same goal. Now, Don't Wait Up, we decide we're going to take that same attitude. Everyone's got to be there. We're practicing every week. We're taking this fucking seriously. And we just went with it. We just knew every step of the way that this is going to be it. These are going to be some of the last songs that we ever write. It's crazy to me looking back on it that we were able to sort of shoulder how heavy those emotions were. I actually would argue maybe we didn't quite realize how crazy of a thing it was to be having to put this to bed. Because I miss it every day. It's not a secret. Anyone who's listened to any of my interviews in the past couple of years will realize that, like, I regret having the band end, and I wish it still existed and would be very happy to have continued to do it on a part-time basis had I known how sad I was going to be without it. We were much more, myself, I was much more naive in the early days of writing Don't Wait Up, really feeling like I am ready for this to end. This needs to end. And we recorded it here in Massachusetts with our friend Jay Moss, who had recorded some compilation tracks with us before. We had a very good relationship with him. And it's hard for me to get too deep into the weeds about all of the emotions that were involved. Sure. But there was a very intense feeling of this thing that we had been doing together that I would argue we had done very well together for many, many years, doing it for the last time, sort of having decided that we are going to pull the plug on this. And at the time, there seemed to be a lot of beauty to it, a lot of beauty to being able to write your own ending is sort of the thing that I kept coming back to, is like, we are deciding this isn't going to end because of a fight or because of a sickness or because of some terrible thing. We are writing our final chapter, and there's real beauty to that. Yeah. I suppose that there was, but the loss of Bane, just for myself personally, selfishly, doesn't compare to the beauty of being able to write your own ending. I'll wipe my ass with that now. If I could fucking go do 3 days with Bane this weekend, it's like doesn't even compare.
It's a wonderful love letter. That album is fantastic. So
thank you, Joe.
It's the antithesis of everything you've ever done. It's a culmination of all of those years. It's there, like Calling Hours and Final Backwards Glance. I mean, just holy shit, dude! If you're gonna do it, that's how you do it. Bands take note.
Put them on. those guys that write the music, they knew. I mean, they were as aware as I was that like we got to pull it all out. We have to just literally take everything we have inside of us and put it on the table right now because we have announced this is it. We took the pressure that we had put on ourselves and they reacted accordingly. They did a really, really amazing job musically for that record. It is a very beautiful record, and the recording is done too. Is amazing too. Jay did a great job for us. It sounds really good.
Yeah,
I'm proud of it. Proud of that record for sure.
Yeah, and rightly so. And you should be. So please do. Yeah. Yeah. So no, the cliche thing like no band reunions or anything. Never. That's
we
done.
don't know. Like, I mean, I'm not getting any younger. We're all getting older now. And hardcore is a kid's game. It's a young person's game, and you don't want to be up there looking tired and old and slow and a shadow of what you used to be. Bane was a very explosive live band, and I would like to say that we held on to that right to the bitter end. Last year we played one show. Last year we played our friend Stu, who died before he passed away. He came up with a bucket list of bands that he wanted to see one more time. We thought that he was going to make it long enough to be able to see one more show at the House of Blues, a venue that he worked at. And he told his wife that I really wish Bane would play, but I don't want to put them in the position to having to go back on their word, because we meant it when we said this is it. We didn't want to like easily go back on that. Even when we were starting to second guess the decision, the voice was like, dude, we told everybody, we dangled that fucking carrot in front of their faces that this is it. Kids flew from all over the world to be at your last show. You can't just turn your back on that easily. As the years go on, that conversation becomes more interesting. But when your very, very good friend is asking you to play what is certainly going to be the last show that he'll ever see, there's no conversation about what we told people 5 years ago. So last summer, I don't know if you knew this, but we had 2 practices. We learned 7 songs. Stu wrote the set list. Sadly, he did not make it. He died the week before the show, but we still had the show, and Bane got up there and played. Like, we were up there, we played a show. It was not the ideal circumstances beyond the very heavy emotions involved. Just lost Stu. It was at the House of Blues with a barricade on a very, very big stage. It wasn't a Bane show the way I would like to have a Bane show.
Right.
But it did feel to me a bit like the ripping off of the Band-Aid of, well, we told kids we're never going to play again because we just fucking played again. So now the conversation to me seems to be easier to have. And if there's anything that we learned through the passing of our friend is that, like, don't waste too much time missing out on things because of mistakes you may have made 5 years ago, things that you said that you thought you believed that actually didn't turn out to be true, et cetera, et cetera. Like, any of us can go at any moment now. And if playing on stage in Bane would make me happy, then I'm not going to let something that I said 5 years ago hold me back anymore. For a long time, it was a real crisis in me. I don't want to do it because I told kids, this is it. But then we did it. We did it for Stu. And yes, there's an asterisk there, but for me, it means that I would play another show at fucking Safe and Sound this Thursday. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would really do it. So,
yeah.
But people are in different places right now. Aaron Dahlbeck has a band that's pretty busy. He has a band called Be Well that kids are really stoked on. That band's been going hard in Silent Drive. And Zach spends a lot of time on the road driving for other bands. He's been in Europe for the last 2 months with Stick to Your Guns.
Yep.
It's hard to get everyone back on the same page. James Saboni, our bass player, this is his record store down in Jacksonville, Florida. Tiger Records, that keeps him very, very busy. So it's hard, but I'll tell you this. I will tell you this here. I don't know how many people are actually watching, but a few weeks ago, I sent a text that said, hey, you guys remember in our little Bane group chat that still stays pretty active. I said, remember that night in Peru, our last show in Peru, we had a rooftop party. The kids who always brought us there invited most of the whole scene onto this rooftop, and they had a vegan cookout, could oversee the city. It was just a beautiful gesture, a very fun night, and some of the best food we'd ever eaten in our lives. And I said, hey, you guys remember that meal at that roof in Peru, and they were all saying, "Oh, it was so great." And Zach said, "Let's go back." And then everyone said, "I'm in, I'm in, I'm in." Within 2 minutes of each other, everyone was. And I screenshotted that and was like, that's a pretty good sign. You know what I'm saying? You can read that as deeply as you want to.
Right.
So I'm not going to say never. I'm going to
Right.
say it seems to be hard to get everyone on the same page, but we're going to be together a few times this summer. Some Red Sox games we're all going to get together and go to.
Oh.
So who knows? Oh, another thing is the Bane documentary is going to play at the Brattle Theater here in August. I don't know if you know about this movie theater, the Brattle, but it's a historic theater in Cambridge, in Harvard Square, that I've been going to see movies since I was 17.
Yeah, I think I've been there. Yeah, it seems familiar. It's in my
one screen, very historic theater with a balcony. Yeah.
Yeah.
So somehow they're gonna screen holding this moment, and we'll all be there for that too.
Oh,
so
that's awesome. Good for you.
That's awesome.
who knows what we'll be talking about?
Yeah. Are there any like bands break up and then like 5 years later there's like this album of unreleased tracks? Is there a Bane library that's sitting on the shelf somewhere that
There
maybe
is.
that you
There
could trickle out? Yeah.
There is mostly cover songs.
Yeah.
Mostly covers, and some of the 7-inch stuff that just didn't get very widely released, like the most recent 7-inch stuff that we put out between the Note and Don't Wait Up isn't even on Spotify. Sam from Triple B Records, who put out one of those 7-inches, has offered many times to get it up onto Spotify, but we're sort of under the idea of like, well, let's keep that and maybe we will put out an odds or ends release. And there's one outtake from the Don't Wait Up sessions, a 1 minute long song. Our friend had just started a label and he wanted to put out a compilation of all bands only doing songs a minute or less. So we wrote one, banged it out for him. His label didn't end up putting that record out. So we have this one that no one has ever heard before, this one song that rips pretty hard, if I'm being honest.
Awesome.
So yeah, I have a list in my phone of I think like 18 songs that we could put out as an odds or end thing.
Oh, no shit.
But I've been pushing that if we're going to do it, I want to write 3 new songs, what would be cooler than if we got into the studio to write 3 like new Bane songs and also put those out on that release. So, but there are a small collection of them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I could definitely see you guys doing something like that, just trickle it out there, and it's always exciting. So
Cool.
maybe a good way to continue living with Bane, but not doing the on the road live tour thing, but you're still involved, right? So it's a hybrid thing, allows you time for your writing also. So
Right.
Both ways, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was that transition of being someone so involved and so active with Bane to go back into a quote unquote normal life? How was that for you guys? Like you personally, like what was that like?
It was really hard.
I imagine.
It was harder than I could have ever imagined. And I knew it was going to be hard. Like I got myself into therapy to prepare for the end of Bane because it's had been all I'd known since I was 25 years old. And I gave myself over to it so completely, didn't start a family, didn't have very healthy relationships, really only focused on this one thing. And it was, I loved it more than anything else I'd ever done in my life. So it was very difficult to let go of it. And then to have it taken from you was a little bit of a hell, to be honest. It was very, very hard. Still to this day, it's hard. It's easier now, 5 years later. I don't have quite the same sort of real dark moments where I just can't believe that part of me is gone. It's hard. It's hard to get to a place where you have to admit that the most sort of exciting part of your life is behind you. It's really hard to have to reckon with that. It's very difficult for me personally.
Sure.
Bane lived a heightened existence. We were very transient. We were on the road all the time. We had friends in corners all over the world, and we loved to get back to them and to share nights with them. And it's a hard fucking thing, man.
I bet. Can't imagine. That's just like, holy shit. That's got to be crazy.
And I'm not trained to do anything. I didn't go to school. I didn't come out of Bane and be like, well, now I can start my life as an actuary, like that's not how it was going to be for me. I literally had to just sort of like figure out how are you going to continue to stay young and to stay sort of engaged with music and art and punk rock and continue to do this because like there was nothing else to fall back on. I don't know how to do anything else. And that's why that was the joke I made earlier. Like maybe your road wasn't a mistake, is like I came out of Bane unprepared to do anything. I don't know how to have a family, how to have just like a normal sort of routine, go to work type life. I just didn't, I never did it. I ran so defiantly from that. And then I found this thing, Bane, and I fucking sank my claws into it as deep as I could and held on until the bitter end, like literally white knuckled it to not have to figure real life out. Then suddenly you're thrown off that ride and you're like, well, I don't know how to do it, I don't know how to figure real life out.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'm a very good poker player, and so I'm never. And I live in an apartment where the rent is very cheap. I don't have a car. I don't have a credit card. I don't have any kids, so I can live a pretty meager existence. So it's not like I'm asking for a handout or anything. I'm doing fine. It's just, it's just sort of a strange thing to be at a certain age and realize that you still look at the world very much the same way you did when you were in your early 20s,
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm 25 mentally forever. I mean, the gray comes in, buddy, but it's
right.
Yeah. Right. That's real, for sure. I'm going to ask you some fun questions now. I appreciate you being so transparent, Aaron. You're a true blessing as always. So one of the questions was, what are your thoughts on UFOs and ghosts, and have you seen any?
I haven't. My mom, she swore she saw one. And my mom, she was not a dramatic person. Like, she was not a teller of tall tales. It still sticks with me that she really claimed with a straight face that she had saw one in her early 20s descend down above a park. And she died when I was in my early 20s, when she was in her early 40s. But in the years before her death, her and her father got very deeply into going to UFO conventions.
Oh, no shit.
Wow.
Exchanging information and exchanging books. This would have been in the late 80s, early 90s. So she would have just had a field day with all the information that's out there now. We used to make fun of them for it. Also thought it was a very sweet bonding thing for her and her father to have together. But she insisted, man. She insisted that she saw one. And my mom wasn't a dramatic person. She did not tell tales that were not based very much in reality. Now, when I was a kid, I was very afraid of everything. I was afraid of ghosts. I was afraid of the woods, John. I'm very excited to read your book because the woods fucking horrify me.
That's right here, Eric. That's right here behind me.
The Blair Witch Project is the scariest movie that I have ever seen in my life. Like, no movie has affected me more than that book. And we moved into an apartment where my mother, my little brother, and myself, when I was 10 years old. And the woman who had lived there before us had died. She had been an old woman. And then the kids downstairs told me that my bedroom was her bedroom. And I became horrified. There was one night where I woke up. I mean, I was constantly sure that she was a presence. And I have a very, very hyperactive imagination. But I do tell a story of having woken up one night in the middle of the night and being absolutely frozen with horror and feeling the pins and needles, your foot asleep, feeling that feeling go through my whole body this way and then that way, like just pass over me. I don't know. I'm not saying anything, but it's one of the more disturbing things but I was fucking 10, 11 years old and I was a maniac. I mean, my imagination was so far ahead of my actual brain that
oh my God, I can't even imagine if someone told me that about like a room I was sleeping in. I would have freaked out.
Well, the worst was that my mom, she like confirmed it. She was like, I wouldn't lie to you. My mom would tell you the deal. And she said, yeah, I believe that was her room. Do you want to trade rooms with me? I will trade rooms with you.
Yes.
But yeah, I've never seen a UFO. I love the idea. I love the idea that they exist. I was at the Science Center, the Science Museum last year and read some little thing that really fucked my head up about like how small of a blip we are as far as being able to even interact with outer space. When you look at the whole timeline of human civilization, we're just this tiny little speck of even having the ability to reach the stars, send a signal out there. And now they have to be on that same timeline, to also be able to do it. And it really just made me convinced, of course there are lives. Like, of course there are lives in other planets.
Oh yeah.
All the sense in the world that we don't know how to reach them yet. We've, like, our technology is just a blip on the human radar if you really look at it. So I refuse to have this narcissistic belief that it's just us and there's nothing else. It makes very little sense to me personally, but I would love to see something. I want to see the thing that makes, like, priests just start mass committing suicide, upend their whole belief system, just fucking snuff into the ground.
Cthulhu goes up and the old ones come.
When I was a kid, I used to legit. I've said this on the show before, actually. I think when we had the UFO guy on, is like I used to lay in bed at night and almost get like anxiety from just like thinking of what's out there. Like, the black holes used to freak me the hell out. Like, just even knowing that that's a thing. That you can just get sucked up.
Forever, the concept of nothingness is so anxiety ridden, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have the same experience with the concept of a black hole. It fucks with my brain because, like, wait, how can something have no end? It doesn't make sense. Everything that we know has an end, and now you're going to tell me there's this thing out there. It's like, I get that you used to just feel actually fucking anxious inside.
I remember laying in bed, like, not being able to sleep, and my heart like just pounding because I just started thinking like deep about that stuff, and like thinking about, like seeing a star out the window and being like, man, like that's this tiny dot that I see, and it's just this huge freaking rock out there.
And then they tell you that it's not even there anymore. That'll fuck it up. That's not even there. That was there years ago. It's just getting to us now.
Right.
It makes you feel small, man. It really feels like our little daily problems that we turn into these big canyons, they really start to take perspective.
Yeah. I would agree. Like, I've never seen anything, but to the point you just made is, to think, to be that stubborn, to think that everything we've accomplished as humans, and whether it's good or bad, I mean, we've accomplished a lot, good and bad.
Yes.
To think that we're just, that's it, like, and we know all these other planets are out there, all these other galaxies, and it's, like, why would we be the only ones that could do this? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense. I agree.
Yeah. But
it's just like us humans to convince ourselves that we are the actual center of everything and nothing else.
Exactly.
It's so us to do it.
We're probably the worst thing out there. Like, it's on a scale, right? We're probably
we're very, very bad. I mean, if there's worse things out there, think of how scary the concept of that is.
Yeah. I had another question. Was somebody asked too? Was I used to wear like a lot of different anime and comic shirts when you're on stage. Are there certain titles that you follow that you enjoy reading? And
yeah. I mean, I've always been into comic books. I was a little nervous you guys were going to be like really into like what's happening now because I can't talk.
Not so much. I'm an EC Comics guy, so like old Tales from the Crypt, and, Vault of Horror. Yeah.
It's funny. Stray Bullets is my favorite comic book of all time. And some people have said that is a crime, that it's a horror comic masquerading as a crime comic because it's so awful and there's so much trauma and terrible things going on that it's not actually a crime comic. It's a horror comic. That's probably my favorite. But I liked Powers, Brian Michael Bendis's comic book. I mean, his superhero story Powers that came out in the early 2000s. I like that a lot. Yeah, I read some manga and stuff like that. Berserk, I like a lot.
Yeah.
I have a coworker that's trying to get me into that. Actually, he has all the books. He's
cool,
like,
man. You should give it a read. You should give it a read.
Bendis, I just wanted to point that I actually bought his book on comic scripts. That's how I tried to start teaching myself to write the actual scripts of a comic. So
yeah, I bought that 2 years ago.
Oh, you did?
Nice. He's my favorite for dialogue. I think he writes fantastic dialogue. He really knows the way people talk to each other, I think.
Yeah. I also took the it's like a Zoom class I did with Scott Snyder too. He did basically, he just teaches comic scripts, comic 101 from the very beginning all the way through script writing, like you know, coming up with you know, plots, you know, where to pull from in your life. And he was talking about this Batman series that he wrote, you know, where that whole idea came from. And it was kind of eye opening. It's cool. It really gets you thinking. But
Yeah.
yeah,
You can get the script book for, I think, the first like 5 issues of Powers written in script format, and he gives you some notes at the back. Those were really helpful for me to go over and see how we formatted it, how we timed it. Yeah.
John took a few of the master's class too, like Neil Gaiman, things like that. So those are good options too for writers.
Yeah.
Neil Gaiman's was awesome. Yeah, he only had one small section on comic script, but it was really helpful. But he's inspired me for one of my future books, like novels. Just the way he like thinks and talks. Like he was talking about how you take like the most basic fairy tale, and if you just flip a couple things in that story, it's a horror story. You know, like almost every fairy tale. Like you talked about Snow White, how like, you know, what if, you know, she was supposed to be asleep? You know, what if you know, that was to protect everyone because she's like some freaking vampire or something, you know, and then someone comes along and awakens her. You know, you just like get your mind thinking. He's like, take your normal fairy tale and just flip it, you know. So one of my future books, I've actually paid a cover artist already, is going to be like a horror spin on like Rapunzel. I can't wait to write it. You know, I don't want to obviously give too much away, but it's not going to be like a princess in a tower type thing. But I started thinking, you know, like, man, like she's basically got like the Stockholm syndrome scenario going on. She's being trapped by this witch. Like she doesn't know what else is out there. She just thinks she's got the normal life. Like, you know, what if these parents, this with a pregnant wife, you know, tries to steal from this lady and didn't know she's a witch, and she freaking curses them and kills the parents and takes the kid and like traps her for her whole life. And then as this girl gets older, she's like, runs into this guy, walks by and just sees her, you know, like just take the story and just make it a horror. And I'm like, man, how has that not been done yet? So
I've never read any of Gaiman's novels. I know that he's become a big deal in the world of like fantasy. Like like probably bigger. He's probably a bigger name now than when he was doing comics, right? Than when he was doing Sandman.
Well, the Sandman's coming out on Netflix in August. They're doing the series too, so that's going to be huge. That'll get that a bunch of traction.
Live action is animated.
Yeah, live action. It's a big budget. Yeah. So, but yeah, American Gods. That show was out on Stars. I didn't even know he wrote that until after the show came out. And then obviously, pretty much everything he's written has been turned into something at this point. But yeah. But I hadn't even really read much of him until I did the class, and he just like blew my mind, like how his brain works. And I'm like, man, I got to go back and read more of this guy's stuff. So
yeah, I've only read the Sandman and the Death stuff. That's all I read from him.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited to see how this show turns out next month. We'll see how the reviews are.
Yeah, that's fascinating, man.
Yeah.
He's going to end up selling 1 million more copies of that comic book.
Absolutely. Oh, and then they did the crossover with Lock and Key too. So like, there's just this. Were you going to say that? Yeah, there's like this whole new like life that's brought to Sandman. So
I didn't know anything about that either, but good for him.
Yeah.
The My Chemical Romance guy, right? He's fucking he put out a comic that exploded on Netflix.
Yeah, right? Umbrella Academy.
Well, Joe's been trying to get me to watch that forever. So
I'm so stoked for that guy. I'm not a fan of the show, but like I know he started out as like some fucking punk kid with a wild imagination.
He worked at a comic book store and he was in a band, just like any one of us, like any story. And he just, went with it. So, okay, Yeah.
I think he's made more money from the Umbrella Academy TV show than he probably ever did through his band, who were a very famous band, man.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah. You know as well as anybody how much the cost of the band could be for, tours and
you don't make any money. But
people don't realize it.
Romance was on a whole other level than us, but
but still
now he's like probably a millionaire.
Oh yeah.
His fucking great imagination. I mean, I'm so psyched.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's nice to see people do those crossovers. So I'm really excited for your book, Aaron. I want you to see that through, please.
I promise it's coming. No. I've this is the hardest I've ever worked on anything in my life. Like, it's going to happen. Hopefully next year. I mean, hopefully. But I got to get an editor, like you said. I'm gonna do it the right way. I'm gonna spend whatever I have to spend, even if I have to like go deep into my life savings to pay for an editor to make sure that this has gone over correctly, and then we'll see. Like part of what fuels me, you know, I'm on like the Reddit writing page and I read these guys, and like I do know that I have a little bit of a step ahead of them in that I have a built-in readership. There are a few hundred kids who are going to buy this. Like you're not the only one, Joel. There are other Joels out there who really fuck with Bane who will pick this up. And like, that feels good to know that I'm not going to have written this, put it out into the abyss and just have it fall completely flat. And like, there will be people reading it. They may not love it. I don't know, but there is a feeling that like, this isn't all going to be for naught. There will be people that will read this. So.
Yeah. That's it, right? Like you're not going to be like on day 3, like, oh, I didn't sell a copy today. Like, you know, you'll probably get a good, you know, push initially, right? And then hopefully if the reviews, you know, come in well, then that's just going to help build buzz, and that's all you can hope for. But that's editors, I mean, you know, my editor, you know, I didn't, it wasn't that much, you know, it wasn't cheap, but you know, I think it was like $600 to not only do the type editing, but like go through the story arc, the 5, why can't I? The 5 structure story arc basically, and make sure that I hit all the steps, you know, and give commentary. I was
thinking it was going to be 5 times that. I was thinking I was going to be spending between $2,000 and $3,000.
If anyone tells you they're going to charge that, that's probably a ripoff. You know, I'm sure there's some that are like the big names out there probably pay that, you know, because they want to get, you know, everything
they can. I could get it done for under $1,000?
Oh, absolutely.
240 page manuscript.
My manuscript. My manuscript. What? Shoot, I don't have it up in front of me. Like the book itself is 252 pages. Like the book, the manuscript obviously was. I don't even. It would probably have been more because it's usually
you're writing in a bigger font, probably.
Yeah.
Bigger font and.
So I mean, it's based off a word count, right? So like he charges by like each 20,000 words, he charges X amount of dollars. And my novel was 70,000 words. So, you know, so it was very reasonable. My cover artist, I paid him like $300 to do the whole wrap. And obviously that was, you know, between that and the editor, that's quite a bit of money out of pocket. So I'm like, shit, I hope I at least make that back, you know? But then if you do, you know, what I did, and I picked this up from other indie authors, is signed author copies, because if you're doing it through Amazon, you can order a huge batch of books and you just pay print costs. They will send you, I bought 75, I'm selling them for $15 on Amazon. I was getting them for like $350 a piece, you know, and you have to pay for shipping. So I paid a couple $100. But if you're signing them and like sending them to people, like you can sell them for $15-20 a pop, and you're making a boatload of money off authors' copies. Like that's, I always wondered how that worked, because I have authors I follow that I'd be like, hey, yeah, I want a signed copy. And they'd be like $15. And I'm like, that's how much it is on Amazon. You're not making any money off this, like any extra, you know? And I learned at the convention I went to, I said like, no. Like there's a reason authors are pushing author copies. It's because they get to pay print for those, you know, they're paying $3-4 a piece for those, and they can sell them for $15-20. So you make a lot more money selling those. And for someone like yourself, obviously, that, I mean, I was a nobody, you know, and I sold plenty of those. Like, you have a backing. So, like, I'm sure there'd be plenty of people that'd be willing to pay you $20 for a signed author's copy. So
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Huge to know. Yeah. Yeah. We're going to, you know, pretty soon it's going to really start thinking about all that stuff. The other day I was in the bookstore just looking at the way opening chapters are laid out, you know, like the first sentence, and just looking at the way different books are typefaced, and looking at covers, finally allowing my brain to like start to imagine this at the next step, because I've been so focused on not thinking about anything other than getting the writing stronger. And it's starting to feel, I can sort of like see the light at the end of the tunnel a little bit.
It's fun. No, those steps are fun. You know, like obviously when you hand it off to an editor, you're like nervous as hell. Like I hope this doesn't suck. But at the same time, as nervous as I was also like, this is it. Like they got it. Like I know I'm not an editor. You mentioned concerned about your prose earlier on. That was my biggest fear all along, is like, I know I can come up with cool story ideas, but I don't know if I can write it, as far as the prose to make it readable.
Right.
And that was what I was nervous about, handing it to them. But in my mind, I'm like, hey, even if he has to gut this thing, like he's going to make this sound like a novel, So,
Right.
so it was kind of like, I was nervous, but at the same time, I'm like, he's going to make this the best it could possibly be. So it is what it is at this point.
I'll tell you, that is huge to hear that you can do it for under $1,000. I mean, because
Oh,
my
yeah.
books are about the same. Mine is 240, and every time I take a pass at it, it gets smaller, and the font is too big. I think it's going to shrink down to probably be closer to maybe 220. So
Yeah,
that's insane.
That's okay.
I was thinking
Yeah.
it was gonna be thousands of dollars. I really thought it was going to be.
yeah. And I think there are some people out there that and I actually got advice from a couple of our past guests, like I mentioned, for that stuff, because there's sharks out there that smell blood. They know a new author, and like there's agents that they're like, oh, they'll follow you because they see you on another post, and they'll DM you and be like, hey, this is my package for editing, like blah blah blah, and I sent it to one of my author friends, and he's like, she's a known shark, don't fucking go near her, like she's gonna rip you off. She'll do your work, but she's way overcharging you, so I'm like, well, that's good to know. So he's like referred me to the editor I ended up using, and I want to use this guy for all my books, because like we just have a good back and forth, like it's just like how it works. So and it's affordable. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Years ago at Equal Vision Records, they put out a collection that they wanted the artists on their label to write poetry or lyrics, and I wrote a short story for it, and they matched me with an editor, and I barely even understood what an editor did at this time, and was very defensive about him in the early stages, and then saw how much better he made my story, like really came to understand the importance of an editor through this little short story that I wrote. And I looked the other day and still have his email, like deep in my email. So I may reach out to him and just see like what his deal is, or if he can recommend me to somebody. But I remember that was the moment where I realized an editor is as important as the writer.
Crucial.
That
was the two biggest things that I got advice on when it comes to like doing it yourself, self-publishing, is editor and cover artist. Like those are crucial, because you hold my book up and it does not look like a self-published book, and that's all I cared about. Like that's what I wanted. I wanted it to like look like something you would pick up off a bookshelf somewhere from a publisher, so
it really does, man. I looked at it the other day. It looks amazing. It looks
thanks
that you're having it done print on demand through Amazon. It looks so professional.
So Barnes and Noble does that too now, so that's another thing.
I can't believe it. So you just give them your work formatted the way you want it, and then they're just printing the books up.
It's crazy. Like I didn't know what print on demand meant as far as like how it worked with Amazon until I obviously did my book. But because I used to hear that term, and I'm like,
yeah,
what do you mean? Like, do they print it and they have it sitting in their warehouse? And it's like, no, they literally, someone orders it off their website and they're printing it from the closest factory and sending it to them within the 2 days. Like it's that quick. Like they must have the machine that just freaking prints the cover, binds it, like goes down the freaking assembly line, and then it's out, But yeah, I think Barnes and Noble does it, and I haven't set up anything on their site yet, but I'm going to. But basically, same as Amazon, you upload your manuscript after it's formatted. So you have your Word doc, you send it to whoever you're going to have format it, or you learn to format it yourself, which I didn't want to do. And then once you have it formatted, it comes back to you in all the files that you need, like PDF, all the technical terms like EPUB, whatever they are, like basically, yeah. So, and then when you're going through kdp.com/Amazon, when you create your account, it goes through step by step, and it's like, upload your manuscript here, your formatted manuscript. So like I'll pull up the email from my formatter and I just include that doc.
Yeah.
And then it's, include a valid PDF cover wrap that is spaced properly, which I wouldn't have any clue how to like fit that, but my cover artist usually will do that for you. They'll send it to you ready for whatever cover size you tell them you plan to use. And then manuscript, cover, name your price, and then a few other, useless things. And then you submit it for approval. And that's it. Like, it's that simple. You have to add your bank account where you want the money to go for sales, stuff like that, but.
And Amazon takes a chunk of every book sold.
Oh yeah. Amazon's basically your publisher. So like they take, but it's reasonable apparently compared to like an actual publisher is you get 60% still, they get 40. It's usually at least 50-50 with a real publisher. And you also have to pay print costs though. So for like a $15 paperback, I'm netting like $5 a copy. So, when I first heard that, I'm like, well, that sucks, but you get used to it, for ebooks, for Kindle, you're netting 75% of whatever price you're selling it at, so they take a smaller percentage of that, but you're selling them for a lot cheaper.
Sure.
So,
sure.
So that's why the author copies are so huge, because instead of netting $5 a copy, you're netting like $12-13 after you ship it. So,
right.
Yeah.
That way, man, I might just literally have 500 books sent to some fucking place some warehouse that I can go to and just fucking do it all myself, man.
There you go. Yeah. And then,
huge for you, Aaron, too, would be to do an audio version of that where you read it, because people know your voice, right?
Yeah. A few people told me that already.
And you have the studio connections anyway with all those people to say, hey man, I want to come lay down just the audio and you read it out. I love when authors read their own books. A lot of them don't like doing it, but it's just cool to hear it like in their voice. So yeah, something to think about, right? So
it is something that I do think about for sure.
When you asked me if I was going to do mine or whatever, I'm like, no, man. Like I talk so fast, I would just destroy that book. But it hasn't aired yet, but I got interviewed through this review site. They're going to do this July wrap-up video, and she had me read an excerpt from my book. And I'm like, fuck. And she's like, pick a chapter that's really meaningful to you, that you feel really sets this, makes this book what it is. And I'm like, well, it's kind of the chapter of the main character getting abused, but do you really want me reading that on your show? I don't actually write out him getting like beat by his dad, but like there's some pretty, his dad's talking to him, pretty rough. And I'm like, do you really want me to read that on your show? And she's like, maybe you can try to improvise a bit or skip. I'm like, I can't even like read the characters. Like, I'm not looking forward to doing live readings at like comic or conventions or whatever, because like I get so caught up in like people staring at me, like I'm gonna so I had to do that on the show. I was reading that chapter, and anytime there was something like the dad is kind of a piece of shit, I had to basically change some of the words he said because it was like derogatory or whatever, just stuff that I wouldn't want to say. So yeah, that was fun doing that on the spot. So the reason I say that is because I could never do my own audiobook. I would butcher it. So, but yeah.
Let's see. I think about it sometimes. Some people have told me that I'm going to need to do that, but we'll see. I can't read my stuff aloud without stopping after 3 sentences and being like, I have to change this. I can't imagine.
Well, you did live though for 25 years, no issue. It was fine.
I can't imagine getting to a place where you're just like, but I did do it. Like every Bane song that went out into the world, I never kind of like wished I had it back. I got to a moment where I had done all that I could. Maybe it's not perfect, maybe it's not great, but it's fucking done. And there was never like a wish that like, oh, I wish I could change that word around, even though I took the lyrics very, very seriously. Like that was my contribution to the band. It was very important to me. But I have been trying to remind myself lately that there was not a lot of wishing that I could have it back. And maybe once this novel is done, maybe once I step back, I will have that same feeling of finality of just like, I did as good as I could. Yeah, I could probably have done better, but at some point I had to stop and I'll move on to the next one, Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah, it's like it's a lot like when you're doing painting, right? You could sit there and do painting for years. I mean, some of the old masters took forever. They ask people when do you know it's done? And there was two answers to that question. One famous artist said, "How do you know when you're done making love?" was one. Mine for me is mine for me is when I feel like I'm diddling. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like if I'm sitting there doing stupid, too small detail shit, I'm just like, I'm fucking it over too much. Like just walk away from this. It's done. It's done at that point. If I feel the diddle, I'm like, we're out. Like this thing's done. On to the next.
And then you transition in your mind. And even if you go back to that piece 2 weeks later, there's not a feeling that you need to grab the pen. There's not a feeling that like
there's always something you see that you can improve upon, and you'll think it's, even if you don't, years later you go back like, oh my God, what the hell was I doing at that point in my career? But it's all progression, right? So, but it's just, and it's kind of good in that regard too, because when you look back at things historically, you can see where you came from, right? And be like, yeah, I have grown, I have gotten better, and this is the best that I could do. I think it was Vincent van Gogh said, I paint with my qualities and my flaws, right? So you could use that with anything, right? So you could do that with your writing. Yeah, right. So it's all there.
I just remember, when I got back into drawing, and that's when Joel and I really started, texting out of work, is I would text him images of my drawing and be like, what's off here? And he'd be like, you got to move the eyeball up like a half centimeter. Like, cause I couldn't figure out why it looked off. But then you also say, man, if people wanted to buy a photograph, they'd buy a photograph. Like, it's like that, you want to see the flaws, it's art, so, but I honestly, like, if I go back and like reread the first short story that got published, I'm like, oh God. But it got published, right? Like I have to look at it that way. Like it was good enough to get published. Like I shouldn't think of it like, man, I sucked, but it's, I'm sure that's just how it is in every, art side of profession, right? Drawing, writing, music, whatever. So, but
I love when you hear like Aaron's hands on the strings, right? You hear like squeakies and things like that, or hear like, just something. It's cool, man. Like, what was that? It was Chuck Biscuits, when he played drums, he used to have the bracelets on his ankle on his kick drum, and they were picking up a weird sound in the studio. And they're like, what the hell is that? And they found out it was like his ankle bracelets were jingle jangling on the kick, and that became part of the sound. Like, that shit's cool. Like it's awesome. Love stuff like that.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind. Punk rock, that there's going to be blemishes, that there's going to be things that are not completely polished, and that's how I would want it. I have to remind myself that.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And keep us posted when that comes out, man. We'll help you.
You'll hear all about it. I mean, I don't have a very big like voice online, but when this thing is done, I'm gonna I'm gonna fucking ring the alarm that this thing is done. I need you people to check this thing out.
Yeah. Please do, because we'll help you in whatever capacity. We always adopt everybody.
I love having you guys in the pocket now that I can come and ask you guys questions.
Sure, man.
Man.
Well, you got at least 2 purchases right here. We'll both buy the book. So there you go.
This week, I really am.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're kind of at the 2-hour mark. Was there anything else that you feel that maybe we haven't covered that you think would be kind of cool for people to know at this point about you and where you're at?
No, I got to hear about the comic. I got to hear about the book. I got to hear about self-publishing. I mean, this was what I was hoping to hear about. I answered all the questions from kids that you had over there.
Yeah, I think so. So far, I think there was someone else just asked. I guess we could conclude on this one, and then stay on for a couple minutes because there's a couple other businessy things that ideas that we have for you that I will talk to you about offline.
Sure.
The final thing was the craziest story from the road. So tell us something fun, zany, horrific, scary, whatever. Just something that says, "Hey, man, this was the moment that shit got crazy."
Man, God damn it! I've been asked this question many times.
I assume so. Yeah, I bet.
I always draw the same blank. I always go back to the same lame story that I really don't want to fall back on right now. Let me try to think of like.
We could defer the question if it's been answered. I can ask you another one.
Comes to mind, one that I frequently sort of come back to is towards the end of the band when we were on our last European run. We were we did that tour in 3 different sections. We did the front end of the tour with Code Orange kids, did 2 weeks sort of like through Germany and through some of the bigger markets. And then for 3 weeks, we broke off on our own and we went way, way east. We went to like Serbia and Bulgaria. We flew to Greece and Israel and went to places that we'd never been before. And we're really out there roughing it, going through strange security checks, having to get visas checked. There was a night where we were taking a train to Belarus, I think, or maybe we were going to Minsk, Russia, where like armed guards came onto the train and checked everyone's bags. Like it felt very exciting. And I fucking lived for all that shit, by the way. I loved sort of the danger and the not knowing what was going to happen next. But there was a night where we were driving, we were back in the van and we were out east there. And already on this tour, the Budokan shootings had happened, the massacre in the Budokan venue. Do you remember when that happened? Somebody broke in there and shot that place up. That had happened in Paris while we were in Sweden. The next night we played in Finland, and like 30 kids came to a show that I think had 200 pre-solds. Like kids just weren't ready to come out to a gig anymore. And then we went and we continued on our way, but there was a real somber feeling. And then there was like a terrorist attack in Israel. We hadn't gotten to Israel yet. We were going there. And suddenly, like, some of the band members, family members, parents were like, you guys got to come home. Like, things are crazy right now. Like, there was this fucking massacre in a venue. Any parent who's got their kid overseas in Europe, you know, they can't differentiate what show is safe, what show isn't. Right. Now, they're saying you certainly can't go to Israel. I mean, there was just a bombing in Tel Aviv. You guys got to come home. And I remember us all sitting up and having just sort of like a very mature conversation about what do we do here? Do we really go home? Do we not go to Israel? Like, we've never been to Israel before. There are many kids there that are excited for us. And I always go back to that ride of like really not knowing if there's a right answer or a wrong answer. And my answer is certainly not the one that people want to follow blindly, because I'm always going to say yes to everything. And I will bring us to dangerous corners. And like, our drummer has 2 kids who he loves more than the fucking earth itself. And his parents were saying like, maybe come home, you know, like we're fucking worried sick right now. Things are going crazy in the world. And we decided that as a team, as a unit, we just sort of like, no, we're going to see this through. We're going to do this. And this is why we're here. And knock on wood. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's one story that comes, that drive, that dark, like in the middle of fucking Slovenia, you know, driving at 3 a.m, exhausted, and all of us really having to have a very mature conversation about, do we go home? Because if one member of the band said, no, I want to go, I think it's probably better that we call it, I don't want to go to Israel. We all would have done it. We would have taken the word of any one member who felt unsafe. But as a group, we decided, no, let's keep going. And it was fine. The Israel show was great. And we went to Paris 2 or 3 weeks after, and we saw the monument that they had put up. And the show was like an electric show. And I gave a long speech that really seemed to touch kids. But that ride, that stands out more to me than some of the like crazier, wacky antics types nights. If you could get Zach on here one night, I mean, he will tell you. I've been asking. He's been ghosting me. He's a great storyteller. I'm not fantastic when it comes to recounting these like wild ass nights, but there were a lot of them. You know, 25 years, there were a lot of crazy ones.
I bet.
But that one I keep going to as just like a real sort of powerful moment for the band.
Yeah, probably helped strengthen your relationship and connection too, because you were respectful of everyone's opinion at that point.
Yeah, I mean, but at this point, you know, this is the last European tour. This is in the last year. There was a love there where if literally one person said, I feel unsafe, we just would have said like, okay, we go home. I was a maniac. I mean, my father died. My father died unexpectedly, and I went on tour to Europe the next day. Like, my band members were looking at me like, what are you fucking doing here? We're not going on this tour. I had to talk Zach into being like, I need to go on this tour. My stepmother said, you have to go on this tour. Let's get on the plane. Like, don't let me second guess this. I don't need to be at my father's funeral. I don't believe in funerals. But like, I was not the guy. I didn't have kids at home. I didn't have a wife at home. I was just fucking ready to follow this, right into a volcano if I had to. But yeah, at that point, I mean, that's part of what makes the story so powerful to me, is that there was such a love within the band. There was so much respect and so much like us against the world, that even right at the very end, where nobody would have blamed us to come home after those things were happening, nobody would have blamed us. We just were like, no, let's keep going. And I'm so glad we did, because the tour was amazing. Israel was amazing.
Yeah. Someplace that for Ben's on my list for sure. Yeah,
keep it on to go there. It's real fucking cool.
I love that history and all that stuff too. So that part of the world's great. So fantastic. Yep. I got one question I always ask everybody on the show now, that seems to be my thing, because we're kind of horror thriller driven. What scares Aaron the most? What scares you the most?
The woods. Straight
the
up, dude. The woods. Okay. The Exorcist scared the shit out of me for sure when I was a kid, because it was the first horror movie that I'd ever seen that seemed very plausible. That seemed like wasn't ridiculous. The good campers didn't win in the end or whatever. It really fucked with me. And then wasn't a big horror guy when I was. It's funny. I read that you said you had read it at a very young age. At a very young age, I had a friend who was, his parents owned a video store, and we used to watch what's his name? Herschel Gordon Lewis horror movies and Blood-Sucking Freaks and all these old slasher movies. He was obsessed. I had this window where I could have really gotten into horror, but I just didn't do it. But the Blair Witch Project, man, the idea of being lost in the woods, the idea of having lost the map and walking all day long and ending up in the same spot that you started, scared me so profoundly that still to this day, if I look out into the woods, even from a car, if I look off the highway into the woods, my heart sinks, man. It fucking scares me. What's the scariest movies that you guys have seen? What scares you guys?
Oh man,
dude, I couldn't do it. I couldn't spend the night. I would be on the whole time.
Oh, so this isn't just real quick. We went camping last weekend for 4th of July weekend with our kids at a campground up in northern New Hampshire in the woods, and we heard coyotes, and we were sleeping in the tent that second night, and my kids were sleeping. My wife and I were just laying there, and all of a sudden you just hear them all around, like coyotes. There was a farm across the road on the other side of the woods. And they were in that farm. They must have been going for something, but you just heard their weird moaning, howl noises. I'm like, what the fuck is gonna happen? As far as by the way, my book has a nod to Blair Witch, because it takes place the year Blair Witch came out, and obviously the fact that it's a lot of it takes place in the woods. There was some inspiration there, because that movie. When that movie came out, when we saw it in theaters, we didn't know if that was real at that point. That was back before the internet was would have put that down to rest quickly, right? People were like, "Wait, what? Is this a documentary?"
That was the movie, and the way they presented it felt very, very real.
That unknown, right? That. So I'm not gonna, that movie might be what I would say would still be the scariest to me, to be honest, just because of the time that I saw it when it came out and not knowing what was real and what wasn't. You don't get that feeling anymore because everything's on the internet. But as a horror buff, this is embarrassing that I don't have an actual answer to this.
Scares Joel.
Yeah. Growing up, I had an older brother, so I got dragged through Nightmare on Elm Street when I was 9, right? Alien, of course, the original thing. Original John Carpenter's thing, right? Especially that scene where he gets his hands cut off when he's jumping the guy's chest and the teeth cut his arms off. I was probably 11 when I saw that shit. So it kind of puts me where I'm at today. So I'm sure there's probably something that scarred me. So.
I just thought of something actually, as you were saying, so I wrote a short story that's I'm going to put a short story collection out probably next year. Just stories that I've either submitted to places or that I just have kind of written for myself. And I wrote one called thalassophobia, which is like the fear of deep water. That's what that phobia is. And I almost drowned as a kid, swimming out to an island in a lake with my friend. And ever since then, I've just like, I don't like being out deep. I can swim, but like I don't like being out where there's nothing within reach where I can like go grab onto after that time. And my wife and I, when we went to Jamaica for an all-inclusive vacation with a couple friends, they wanted to go scuba diving, and I was like, fuck no, I'm not doing that. So they talked me into doing snorkeling, but they still took us out miles out into the ocean, and we were snorkeling in the ocean. And the first time freaking choppy wave went over my snorkel and filled my mouth full of ocean water, I'm like, I'm good, I'm going back on the boat. And I went back up there and they all did their thing. They found like sea urchins and shit with like the instructor. So I wrote a short story of this guy that's on a vacation with his new wife and friends that is terrified of deep water because he almost drowned as a kid, and they convince him to go snorkeling, and he gets back on the boat, but then there's a freaking shark attack basically, and all shit hits the fan, right? So like it ends up at the end of the story where it's basically on him to go out into the water to grab something to rescue them. Like, it's this guy that's terrified of deep water. There's a shark out there, but he has to do it because he's really the only one left that could do it. So it's like that terrifies me. So
fucking scary. Deep water is horrifying. The idea of how little of a percentage of the ocean that we actually have explored is fucking scary.
If I was out there and something came up and brushed my leg, man, I would shit myself. Like, no lie. Like, just you out there floating around, it's like it just nuzzles you. I'm like, I'm done. I'm all done.
Man, because especially when you have the snorkel, like the goggles on, and you're looking down below, like it's like another world down there. I mean, you see it on like TV and stuff, but like when you see it in person, like you see the coral reefs and like all that stuff. It's like its own world, and like nothing should be neon. Like, why are there neon fish? Like, there's all these freaking weird bright color things swimming and like eels, and I'm like, I'm good.
Totally.
I would never want to go scuba diving. I don't have any desire. I know my wife would do it in a heartbeat.
I never had any desire for that either, man. That's funny. But I'm the same way with camping. I can't imagine camping. I can't imagine going on a hike in the woods. It is so crazy, man. If there's not a Chipotle within fucking 2 minutes of me, I'm good.
You would not be out here then, buddy. Yeah, there's nothing out here. Yeah,
so
I'm in the sticks.
Live for it. Some people love it, man. I'm so interested in the people that just feel so settled out there away from the city life.
That's Joel. He's out in the middle of nowhere.
It's by design. We decided to do it. We did the total COVID thing and got the hell out of the city when shit was getting real. So, and then
that's what motivated you?
Yeah, I mean, it was getting wild, man. Like, we were living in Nashua, New Hampshire, and not a big city, right? It's not like Boston or Worcester or anything, but like
it's a city for sure.
I think it got weird when like they started putting like armed people and the entrance of the supermarket. And I was like, because they were trying to enforce mask mandates and things like that, and I'm like, it was kind of feeling like a powder keg was coming. And I have young kids. And I'm like, man, shit could go really sideways here. And this was before the election was coming, right? All those things too as part of that, or no, that was right after the election, so you didn't really know what was going on, and it just felt like this was not a good environment. And like, I don't want my kids to be going into a grocery store and some maniac opens fire because of policy that the store has, or anything like that, and have them, or even just having them witness these things going on. Like, this isn't how things normally are. I don't want you to grow up in the police state in that vision. So we wanted to move them out to the country. We homeschool the kids. We do that. We all wanted them to learn how to be self-sufficient, take care of themselves. So that was the big catalyst for coming out here. So yeah, how to grow your food, how to respect nature, respect the animals, do those kind of things, and take care of stuff, give them responsibility. So a big part of it. So
have bears attack you, shit like that.
No bears attack me. I gotta keep the fox gotta stay away from the chickens. I gotta fight that thing sometimes, but no big deal. No big deal. Yeah. I think I keep saying one last question. I'm like Columbo over here. One more thing. 27 years ago, you sent me a demo tape, the first demo tape, and I still have it. You hand wrote all the songs on. If somebody were to ask you for a demo tape now of the entire Bane catalog, you could pick like 3 or 4 songs. What would be the quintessential Bane songs that has to be on that tape that defines that band?
3 or 4
Bane songs that have
Bane
to be
songs, like,
yeah. If you were to sum it up, like say,
on
hey,
the collection.
like these are the Bane songs.
God.
Yeah.
How have I never been asked this question before?
Oh, good. I found one.
Brand new one. I mean, that's fucking rare, dude. I'm gonna just level with you right now because most of them I just have the answer ready to go. I guess what I would do is I would like. It's so hard. I mean, I could keep you guys here for another 20 minutes. I almost feel like I would skip. I almost feel like I would skip our first LP because I'm really disappointed with how the performances are there. Sonically, I think it came out terrible. But that song happens to have our most popular song, Can We Start Again, like the biggest Bane song that garnered the biggest reaction is on that very disappointing record. I think I would skip that record and probably put like maybe the first song we ever recorded, the very first song on the demo, which is called Lay the Blame. So the first song that I ever wrote for Bane and was a song that I still feel very, very proud of. Felt like I'd been building up to writing this song for a long, long time. And then I would probably do maybe this is hard.
I'm sorry. And it's late at night.
Maybe I'd do Lay the Blame, Ollie Frazier, which is the last record on Give Blood. I mean, the last song on Give Blood. And then I guess I would give him something from The Note. I don't even know what. Maybe End with an Ellipsis from The Note. And then give him Calling Hours, I guess. Calling Hours is a song that I'm very, very proud of, even though like I'm only a very small fraction of it. I think it's one of the most beautiful Bane songs. And certainly like is a song that I miss the most. I think if you asked me like what song do you miss the most? Like the feeling of how quiet the crowd would get when we would play that very pretty intro and having this feeling that we had the entire crowd in the palm of our hands waiting to start singing with us was like one of the more infectious things of being in that band. It's that feeling of like everyone is fucking dead silent right now, listening to this pretty guitar noodling that Zach is doing and knowing that it's building into this thing where we're all going to scream together. I think I would have that be on there too. So I guess I'd do Lay the Blame and then Ollie versus Frazier and then End with an Ellipsis and Calling Hours. But those are 2 very sad songs, so I don't know. I'm the wrong guy to talk to.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, every point of my life from being a kid, 17, listening to your albums, on the bus going to school, right, coming home from school, to last week drawing images for our company here. Thank you, and thank you to the other members in the band for being the soundtrack of my life. And I know I don't speak just for myself and other people, but thank you very much for everything that you've done. It's hugely important, and some keep that in perspective. And you've done a lot of good, Aaron. So we appreciate it.
Well, I just need you to know that words like that are never lost on me. I always really feel like when someone tells me that we were a soundtrack for a real portion of their lives, that is the most humbling and overwhelming thing. Thank you so, so much. That our band meant that to you is indescribable for me, honestly. Just eternally grateful to have been able to have people like you feel very, very connected with this thing that we did. Thank you for that, honestly.
Well, you're very welcome. I don't speak on, so there's others that.
Hopefully you can get him on. I'll tell him when I see him how much fun this conversation was and how great you guys are, and maybe he'll do it. He did one recently. I saw he did a podcast recently, so He's looking to get the word out about the Silent Drive record. I bet he would come on.
Yeah, I'd love to have him because I'm a huge fan. So
I'm going to tell him.
Yeah. I think we'll wrap on that note. Just hang out for a few minutes.
Okay, I'll hang out.
Yeah, so appreciate your time, Aaron, and coming on. So hopefully everybody else enjoyed it.
So.
Awesome to catch up. It's been a long time. So
thank you.
Have a great evening, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.